Chapter 2958. Absolute Flame tilted his head and looked at the 6 experts in confusion. Are you talking to me? It was Ling Han who was fighting. What did it have to do with her? Seeing Heavenly Venerate and Fire's appearance, the 6 powerhouses were also baffled. If he was willing to let Yu Borong go, he could just nod his head. If he didn't agree, he could either snort coldly or ignore him. But what's the point of looking at them like that? Teasing them? If it had been someone else, they would definitely have been enraged and slapped that person to death. But now they were facing a 7th-step supremacy. Even if they knew that the other party was teasing them, what could they do? Once one reached the 7th step, one could do whatever they wanted. Heaven could not suppress them, earth could not imprison them, and they did not need to care about anyone's feelings at all. Ling Han attacked wildly. He released all of his planes. Now that there was only one opponent, and he was suppressing him, he was not worried that Yu Furong would have the strength to destroy his plane. If that were the case, she would really be seeking death. This gave Yu Borong an indescribable pressure, and it caused his situation to become worse and worse. He had no choice but to seek help from his companions again. The 6 experts were dumbfounded. They were truly shocked by Ling Han. Hundreds of planes, what kind of concept is that? It had to be known that only 3 of them had nurtured a plane within their bodies when they were quasi-Empyreans, allowing their combat strength to surpass others of the same level. But only one of them. Previously, there were only 5 7th-step cultivators in the Frost Plane. Other than their descendants and disciples, how could the others receive the 7 steps' favor and open another space in their Dantian to accommodate a second plane? But even if there were such lucky people, such as Lin Yu Lien, Xian Chihu, and so on, how could they compare to Ling Han? Unworthy to the ends of the earth. Is this what insanity is capable of? The 6 of them were thinking, could it be that frenzy was so terrifying? 7 steps could only open up space to accommodate one more plane, but frenzy could fit hundreds of them? My lord, Yu Borong is the main force in resisting frenzy. We only have 106th step cultivators. How can we lose them here? A 6th step cultivator bravely said to Empyrean Dead Flame. Juehua tilted his head and said unhappily, why are you asking Nyo? Nyo doesn't know what you are talking about. You are so annoying, Nyo hates you. The 6 powerhouses were shocked. Chibu said that they were annoying. Did that mean that he was going to make a move? They hurriedly retreated. Once 7 steps made his move, no one could stop him. Condensing the 6 types of intrinsic powers of the origin world, this power was indescribably powerful. It was simply impossible to resist. You guys? Yu Borong was furious. He was about to be beaten to death, but not only did his companions not save him, they even retreated and pulled apart the distance. Were they pig teammates? However, he didn't have the time to reprimand him. Ling Han's attacks were too violent, and it was obvious that he wanted to destroy him within 2 hours. His attacks were like a landslide, and when he punched out, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The entire plane trembled, and a terrifying energy storm was triggered. This undoubtedly made the battle even more dangerous. Not only did Yu Borong have to resist the direct pressure from Ling Han, but he also had to guard against the energy storm that could attack from below at any time. This naturally made his situation even worse, and he was in imminent danger. Of course, this energy storm was also fair, and it similarly put immense pressure on Ling Han. However, Ling Han had made up his mind to exchange injury for injury. He had the upper hand, and he would at most be heavily injured by the energy storm, but Yu Borong would die. The 6 powerhouses saw this, but not only were they unable to save him, they didn't even dare to open their mouths to plead for mercy. That was because Heavenly Venerable Juehua had already called them annoying. Who would dare to go against him? Bang! Yu Borong's left arm exploded from Ling Han's punch, and blood splattered everywhere. 6 steps was extremely powerful. Wherever the blood floated, it was as if it had been heavily hit, and it exploded. Ling Han also spat out a mouthful of blood. In order to heavily injure Yu Borong, he had also been hit by the energy storm. This was the price that he had to pay. It was as if he didn't feel anything, and his attacks continued. Yu Borong sucked in a deep breath, wanting to forcefully draw in the energy of heaven and earth so that he could quickly regrow his arm. However, this was the void, and the 6 kinds of intrinsic energy were incomparably berserk. He sucked in a mouthful of it, and his face instantly turned red. He had originally been able to suppress this berserk energy, but he was currently heavily injured. Not only could this not help him, but it would instead cause his injuries to worsen. "Old thing, I'll send you on your way," Ling Han said coldly. His fists furiously punched out, and his attacks became even more ferocious. Yu Borong gritted his teeth and stubbornly endured. He had cultivated to the 6th step, so how could his will be so easily defeated? Fight, fight, fight. The 2 powerhouses were both going all out. At this time, if Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief, then Yu Borong would be able to recover and escape with his life. But if Yu Borong took a breath of relief, then only death awaited him. Ling Han forced Yu Borong to continuously retreat. Planar energy suppressed him, and he punched out again, instantly sending Yu Borong flying. Boom, an energy storm surged out, smashing right into Yu Borong's body, heavily injuring him. Yu Borong groaned. Half of his body had exploded. This was caused by the energy storm and Ling Han working together. Even if he was at the 6th step, he was still extremely weak in this dangerous place. Ling Han howled and followed after him. He wouldn't give his opponent any more chances. He was going to use a series of attacks to completely finish off Yu Borong. The 6 powerhouses were all restless. Yu Borong was really going to die. Could they just watch as he died? Could they attack? The supreme being of the 7th step was standing right in front of them. Did they dare to? Just in this short period of hesitation, Yu Borong had finally reached the end of his rope. No matter how strong his will was, no matter how tenacious he was, it couldn't be used as food. He had been heavily injured, and half of his body had been blown away. This seriously affected his battle prowess. And Ling Han had even used a method that didn't care about his life. This wasn't exchanging injury for injury, but rather exchanging injury for life. "Brat, you will definitely get your retribution." Yu Borong let out a roar of despair. He believed that Celestial Venerable Chong Yen and the other supreme beings of the 7th step definitely wouldn't let Ling Han off. Especially now that even the 6th step had been killed by Ling Han, the supreme beings of the 7th step would also put down everything and kill Ling Han at all costs. Otherwise, they would never have another chance in the future. "You talk too much nonsense," Ling Han said coldly. He was merciless, and he punched out 30 times in a row, instantly killing Yu Borong. 6 steps, dead. The 6 powerhouses were all cold and speechless. This fox mourned the death of a rabbit, and it made them all feel sad. Ling Han was too ruthless. The supreme beings of the 6th step were the main force against frenzy. The death of even one of them was incomparably pitiful, and it was a huge loss to the Frostfire plane. Wang, the supreme beings of the 6th step were dead. Boundless life essence boiled, transforming into an ocean that surged towards Ling Han. Wait, why was there so little of it? Chapter 2960. My lord. Puff A 6-step cultivator wanted to beg for mercy, but just as he opened his mouth, a bloody hole appeared in his chest. He wanted to speak, but all that came out of his mouth were blood foam. His eyes instantly dimmed. A 6-step expert was killed just like that. Whether it was Ling Han or the remaining 5 experts, all of them were shocked speechless. The power of a 7th step was unimaginable. The eyes of the 6th step cultivator were filled with unwillingness. He was already at the 6th step, and there were only a few dozen people stronger than him in the entire Yuan world. However, he had been killed in one strike. How could he be willing to die? Zhu Hua was unmoved, and there was only endless coldness on her face. It was as though she did not care about killing a 6-step martial artist. 7 steps and below were all ants. Ling Han suddenly thought of a saying. Although they were all celestial venerables, they were invincible 7s, undying and indestructible. They didn't need to care about anyone. If they were unhappy, they could just kill them. The world was big, but it was no bigger than 7 steps. Go! The remaining 5 experts were terrified. So what if they were at the 6th step? In front of the 7th step, they were just meat on the chopping block. Zhu Hua was cold and beautiful, but she gave off endless murderous intent. She opened her hand, and suddenly, the 5 cultivators seemed to be blocked by an invisible wall. None of them could escape. They were only 1 step away, but it felt like they were separated by layers of mountains. The difference was greater than the heavens. The 5 experts all looked hopeless. It was obvious that absolute fire wanted to kill them all, and Chibu had the ability to do so. No matter how much they struggled, it was useless. Pu Juho was like a god of death. With a single strike, she blew up a level 6. Her methods were incredibly cruel and violent. Her slender hand directly pierced through the opponent's chest, not caring that her jade hand was stained with blood. Pa! Another 6th-step cultivator's skull was smashed by her. Blood and brain matter splattered everywhere, and a few drops even landed on her pretty face, causing her absolute beauty to carry a trace of bewitchment and cruelty. In front of the 7 steps, the 6 steps actually couldn't withstand a single blow. Ling Han knew that 7th step was powerful, but he never thought that the difference would be so great. It was no wonder that Zhou Heng and Chu Hao, who were only a step away from reaching the 7th step, were not taken seriously by anyone who had reached the 7th step. If they did not take this step, they would be trash. The remaining 3 powerhouses resisted with all their might. Which 6th step Empyrean hadn't gone through many trials and tribulations to reach this step? Even if they were left with only despair, they would still fight to the last drop of blood. However, in front of Chibu, they were all slapped to death by a single punch or a single palm. After 6 strikes, the 6 experts were all killed. Absolute Fire's killing intent boiled. His dark red eyes stared at Ling Han coldly and mercilessly as if he was looking at a corpse. Most of the life essence chi was absorbed by her, but there was still a lot that flowed towards Ling Han. The 6 powerhouses added together still had more than a single Yuborong. This made Ling Han feel like he had earned back. He quickly put away this strange thought and also stared at Absolute Flame. Every single hair on his body was standing on end, and he was filled with nervousness. Sweat unknowingly flowed down his body like a stream, instantly drenching his clothes. Ling Han even thought that if Absolute Fire wanted to kill him, would he have the time to tear open the void and escape? This was also why he hadn't left earlier. He had been locked by Absolute Fire's divine decree. If he acted rashly, he would definitely suffer a lightning-fast attack from her. He couldn't take such a risk. This was the true strength of a 7th-step Empyrean. Ling Han sighed inwardly. He had originally thought that with his battle prowess of 6th step, even if he couldn't defeat a supreme like Empyrean Sundermount, he could still escape. But now, it seemed that he had been too naive. Absolute Fire didn't speak, nor did she make a move. She only stared coldly at Ling Han. Ling Han naturally didn't speak either. Now, no matter what he did, under the influence of his aura, he would attract the other party's attack. Since Absolute Fire hadn't made a move all this time, there was still room to turn things around. Thus, Ling Han didn't take the risk. Of course, if Absolute Fire attacked, Ling Han wouldn't just stand there and wait to be captured. He would definitely fight. In a moment, or perhaps an epoch, Ling Han lost his sense of time. He only knew that Absolute Fire's killing intent was finally starting to fade. Her eyes had returned to normal and were no longer crimson like blood. "Who am I?" she murmured. Her eyes were fierce one moment and clear the next, as if 2 thoughts were fighting. "Who are you?" Ling Han asked. He was truly daring to provoke the other party at this time. "Who am I?" Absolute Fire howled, her black hair dancing in the wind. Her figure shot into the sky. Peng, peng, peng. She directly smashed through the plane of this level. Along the way, she smashed out a large hole. He didn't know which plane this was, but all the upper planes were almost smashed through in an instant. She had already entered the void, and it was difficult to see her. Boom, an energy storm surged out of the hole she had smashed open, transforming into a heavenly waterfall. Ling Han hurriedly retreated. Absolute Fire could ignore this energy storm and directly pass through it with her flesh, but he couldn't. If he was swept up, he would definitely be severely injured. He left this place and found a place to first cultivate in seclusion, refining the life essence he had absorbed. Then he released the Empress and Hu Niu from the Celestial Entertainer Inn. After explaining the situation to them, the two women were stunned. Who exactly is this absolute fire? Is it really a seed of madness that was planted in the last origin world? However, before it could erupt, it was killed with no means of retreat, and its trump card couldn't be used. Hold on, she calls herself absolute fire. There is only a horizontal line between fire and annihilation, and if annihilation is reversed, wouldn't it be annihilation? Annihilation was the name of madness in the last origin world. The three of them exchanged a look, all of them in awe. The last origin world had collapsed, and absolute fire might not have been prepared, so her spirit had been wounded by the power of the great collapse, and was like a blank piece of paper. But previously, she had absorbed life essence, and her instincts had been awakened, stimulating her, causing her to unleash her ferocious nature and go on a killing spree. The reason why she didn't attack Ling Han was probably because she hadn't awakened her memories yet. She was still thinking about the good times she had with Ling Han. However, if Ling Han and the other two guessed correctly, when Absolute Flame regained her memories, the entire origin world would be her enemy. It was too terrifying. With a 7-step helper in frenzy, how much damage would he cause? The situation might not be that bad. Perhaps Absolute Flame was only agitated, and that's why he did some extreme actions, the Empress said. Ling Han slowly nodded. No matter what, I need to increase my strength and reach step 5 as soon as possible. Only then will I have the strength to fight against step 7. Even if he advanced 5 steps, he could only match up to 7 steps, because in terms of physique, 7 steps were undying and imperishable. They could only suppress and not kill, but he could be injured and could be killed. The two sides were not equal. Ling Han began to search for the origin stone veins again. After cultivating diligently, he felt an incomparable sense of oppression. End of this chapter. Chapter 2961. The death of 7 6-step heavenly venerables would definitely cause a huge uproar. As expected, more 6-step heavenly venerables appeared recently. Ling Han even sensed an indescribably powerful aura, which should belong to a 7-step powerhouse. If heavenly venerable and fire didn't show up to explain, the deaths of Yu Borong and the others would definitely be blamed on Ling Han. This would undoubtedly solidify the evidence that he was madness's subordinate. Ling Han didn't have time to care. He kept searching for mineral veins and cultivating. Refining a portion of the life essence of the 7 6-step Empyreans had also allowed his cultivation base to advance. However, if he wanted to reach the peak of the 4th step, he still needed too much energy. If he didn't have the support of the Great Medicine, the time it would take would be incomparably shocking. Ling Han searched for the spatial passageway to the lower planes, but he couldn't find it. Time passed quietly. He was discovered many times, so he was naturally hunted down. The most dangerous time was when he sensed the arrival of a 7-step powerhouse. He could only tear open the void and leave. After taking a big detour, he returned to this place. Time flew, and 20 billion years passed quietly. Ling Han finally cultivated to the peak of 4th step. However, he didn't gain much from mining ores. He basically relied on his own bitter cultivation to reach this step. He couldn't help but sigh. Without the support of Great Medicine, his cultivation speed was really ridiculously slow. However, he finally reached the peak of 4th step. Great Medicine was useless to him now. If he wanted to advance to 5th step, he needed Red Great Medicine. Others only needed Orange Great Medicine to advance to 5th step, but he couldn't because his starting point was too high. Not to mention Red Great Medicine, he didn't even have Orange Great Medicine. He cultivated in seclusion again. 300 million years passed, but he didn't make any progress at all. If he wanted to rely on bitter cultivation to advance to 5th step, he might need 1 or 2 or even more epochs. Ling Han sighed. This was too slow, this wouldn't do. He believed that there were more great medicines in the depths of this plane group, and the Red Great Medicine definitely existed. However, the problem was that he couldn't enter before reaching 7th-step combat strength. This formed a paradox. Forget it. I'll go out and take a walk. Ling Han decided to return to the primordial world to experience the mortal world and change his mentality. Maybe he would be enlightened. Besides, he had been away for too long. It was time for him to go back and see what was going on in this world. He tore open space and quietly returned. Right now, there should be countless people looking for him. Once he was found, the seventh step Supreme Being would definitely make a move. Therefore, Ling Han was very low-key. He changed his appearance and aura, not wanting to be recognized by anyone. Otherwise, his idea of going to the mortal world to gain experience would definitely fall through, and he would only be left with the fate of being hunted down. Both he and the Empress missed their children very much, and after so much time had passed, they should have gained many more generations of children. The three of them returned to the Xuanma Plain. As soon as they arrived, they noticed something different. The abundance of spiritual energy here and the activity of essence particles far exceeded that of the past. It had reached a level comparable to the Frost-Fire Plane. The Xian-Mo Plane had leveled up, going from high to super high. Ling Han sensed for a moment, and sure enough, the seeds of the 9 high-level planes in his body had lost their connection to their original planes and disappeared forever. I wonder if the Frost-Fire Plane has fallen. Let's ask. They came to a city, entered a restaurant, and then listened to the loud chatter of the crowd. But these were all ordinary people, and could not possibly know too much about the overall situation of the world. Thus, the three of them quickly left the restaurant and went to search for a larger sect. They soon arrived at a sect. A great disciple recruitment competition was being held here. One after another, young people with great potential were displaying their talents, and on the stage, there were figures of the older generation observing, occasionally whispering to each other. Ling Han sensed for a moment, and directly dragged out a celestial king from the sect, asking about the current situation. Though celestial kings were not qualified to enter the foreign battlefields, they had no lack of understanding of the major events of the world. Under the pressure of Ling Han's aura, the other would answer all his questions. Furthermore, this was not a secret. Everyone knew, and there was no need to keep it a secret. True enough, the Frost-Fire Plane had already fallen. However, madness was currently devouring this plane and needed a digestion period. In this period, madness naturally had no time to attack and gave the origin world a rare time to rest and recuperate. Now, various forces were stationed in the Xuanma Plane, and it was said that there were experts discussing counterattacking the Frost-Fire Plane. As the Frost-Fire Plane was a super high-grade plane, the plane core had indescribable value. As the plane collapsed, the core no longer had destructive power. If they could get their hands on it, they might be able to directly advance from the 6th step to the 7th step. An additional 7th step meant a little more hope for the origin world. Thus, even a venerable of the 7th step would act to create opportunities for others. Everyone was waiting for madness to almost devour the Frost-Fire Plane and expose the plane core. Then, they would take the opportunity to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. After hearing this, Ling Han couldn't help but be tempted. If he could get the core of the Frost-Fire Plane, it should not be difficult for him to advance to the 5th step, right? As long as he reached the 5th step, he would have the power of the 7th step. Even if he faced a 7th step or even madness, he would have the power to fight. Alright, I'll remember this. Ling Han asked again, do you know where Ling Meng is? Ling Meng? The Celestial King was confused. No matter how Ling Han asked, the Celestial King didn't know what Ling Meng meant. Ling Han could only change the way he asked, what about the Ling family? Ling family? Ling family? The Celestial King finally remembered some information and said the location of a faction. Ling Han casually erased the Celestial King's memory. Otherwise, the Celestial King might guess something was wrong. Then, Ling Han's identity would be exposed. The three of them set off towards the Western Desert Mountain. The Western Desert Mountain wasn't far. Otherwise, with the Celestial King's strength, it would be impossible for him to travel so far and know where the Ling family was. The Western Desert Ling family was a very powerful faction. The family had a 6th heaven Celestial King overseeing it. No celestial venerables? Ling Han didn't suspect anything. In the eyes of the world, Celestial Kings were the strongest. Celestial venerables rarely appeared in the world. Besides, the Celestial venerables had to continue building defense lines. Once madness completely devoured the Frost-Fire Plane, The cruel war would restart. They had to be prepared. However, a sixth heaven celestial king was really a little weak. He arrived at the foot of the western desert mountain. This was the mountain gate of the Ling family. All the areas on the mountain were classified as private property by the Ling family. No one was allowed to enter unless invited. Ling Han adjusted his aura to that of a celestial king. However, he was only at the fifth heaven. "Greetings, milord." There were two immortal palace tier cultivators acting as guards at the door. After discovering Ling Han, they hurriedly bowed respectfully. Ling Han's body was surrounded by 5 rays of light. This was the most obvious sign of a celestial king. Originally, this couldn't be imitated at all. However, there were too many planes in Ling Han's body. It was a small origin world in itself. Imitating a celestial king was naturally a piece of cake. Chapter 2962. Ling Han nodded. "I want to see your patriarch." "Please wait a moment, milord." The 2 guards hurriedly nodded. One stayed behind to talk with Ling Han, while the other hurriedly flew into the mountain to report. Not long after, a celestial king came out to greet them, but he was only in the first heaven. This was a young man dressed in green, exuding an outstanding temperament. "I am Ling Gaoyuan, greetings, senior." This young man bowed to Ling Han. The Empress and Hunyo couldn't disguise as celestial kings, so they simply concealed their aura, roughly equivalent to ascending origin tier, and changed their exquisite appearance, so they didn't attract any attention at all, and were directly ignored by this young man. Ling Han looked at him. Surnamed Ling, so he was of Ling Jianshui's bloodline, but he didn't know which generation he was. His aptitude wasn't much. Ling Han sighed internally. It couldn't be helped. The bloodline would definitely become thinner as it was passed down, and there were signs from Ling Tianhua, the 4th generation. He was far inferior to Ling Jianshui and Ling Fifan, and basically couldn't advance into the celestial venerable tier. Thus, when it was passed down to Ling Gaoyuan's generation, it was even more hopeless to become a celestial venerable, and becoming a celestial king was already good enough. Ling Han nodded. "I am Han Lin, passing by this place, so I came to pay a visit." Ling Gaoyuan was slightly puzzled. This was also a reason? However, the other was in the 5th heaven, so what he said was naturally what he was, and he had no right to refute. He wasn't afraid either. His father was in the 6th heaven, and there were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, reaching the heavens with each step, so did he need to worry that this Han Lin harbored evil intentions? "Those who come are guests. I believe my father will definitely be willing to chat with senior, please." His expression was respectful. He invited Ling Han up the mountain, and after entering an elegant guest room, he called for a servant to serve fragrant tea. "Senior, please take a seat, and allow me to go and ask my father. However, my father is in seclusion, and may not be able to entertain senior these few days." "No matter," Ling Han said with a smile. In any case, he had plenty of time. After Ling Gaoyuan left, Ling Han released his divine sense, sweeping the entire western desert mountain, and soon he revealed an expression of surprise. There was not a single Empyrean here. Previously, he had only thought that Ling Jianshui, Ling Shi, and the others were living in seclusion. After so many years, the Empyreans had also developed the habit of keeping a low profile, so it was normal for them to not appear in the world. But no matter what, there should at least be an Empyrean guarding the base camp, right? Aside from Ling Jianshui and Ling Shi, where were the large black dog, the heavenly venerable original birth origin, the Rain Emperor, and the others? Ling Han was very puzzled. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. We have to find out. If it was someone else, with the anxiety in Ling Han's heart at this time, he would definitely capture Ling Gaoyuan for questioning, but this was his own descendant, so of course, Ling Han could not do so. Let's wait and see. He, the Empress, and Hunyo suppressed their impulses and stayed here. They ate and drank well every day as they waited for the 6th heaven celestial king to come out of seclusion. This celestial king was called Ling Feizhou, but no one knew the name of Ling Feizhou's predecessor, because Ling Feizhou had only moved here a few 100 million years ago. As for where he had lived before, no one knew. In the blink of an eye, 3 months passed. As usual, Ling Han woke up early and walked one round on the mountain, comprehending the heaven and earth. There were planes in his realm, but every plane was empty and had not nurtured any life. There was still a huge gap between this and the true origin world. Being able to create things, that was the true leap out of the heaven and earth, surpassing life and death. Frenzy could create things, though what it created were all monsters. This was something that no seven-step cultivator could compare to. Ling Han was pondering this question. If he could create things, then his power would undoubtedly receive a great boost. Just look at the planar wars. The more living beings there were on a plane, and the stronger they were, the stronger the plane itself would be. In the past, the celestial realm and the foreign realm had battled for innumerable years. The reason why the foreign realm had been unable to obtain victory for so long was because there were many living beings in the celestial realm, and they had strengthened the power of their own plane. But creating things was too difficult, too difficult. Ling Han comprehended the heaven and earth, and comprehended every blade of grass and tree on the mountain. Though they were incredibly weak, they were all living beings, and they were things that he could not duplicate. Shio shio shio. A few figures streaked across the sky, and an instant later, their auras surged forth, enveloping the entire western desert mountain. These were 4 celestial kings, and the strongest had reached the 8th heaven, while the rest were all at the 5th heaven. Ling Han frowned slightly. These celestial kings were all filled with hostility. Were they here to cause trouble? Without him, that 8th heaven was enough to suppress the 6th heaven, and the Ling family would definitely suffer a loss. But now that he was here, surviving spawn of the Ling family, hurry up and come out. A loud shout rumbled like thunder. Ling Han was instantly infuriated. Surviving spawn of the Ling family. Surviving spawn. 4 seniors have arrived. Please forgive this junior for not going out to welcome you. Ling Gaoyuan flew into the sky and bowed respectfully to the 4 celestial kings. This made Ling Han feel dissatisfied. The other party had already sent a slap over, and you still took the initiative to put your face in front of them? But on second thought, the Ling family currently only had 1 6th heaven celestial king, so how could he have the confidence to do so? He suppressed his dissatisfaction, and killing intent grew in his heart. Did they really treat him as a traitor and wantonly suppress his descendants? What about Lin Luo, Zhou Wu, and the others? Why didn't they help take care of them? There's no need to pretend. Descendant of a traitor, why aren't you kneeling and accepting your punishment? Said a 5th heaven celestial king. He was dressed in a long red robe and had jet black hair. He exuded an elegant aura. However, when he said this, his tone was filled with intense disdain and condescension. Ling Han couldn't hold it in any longer. With a thought, the red-robed celestial king let out a cry of surprise and immediately fell from the sky. With a bang, he crashed heavily into the ground, his entire upper body embedded into the ground. What was going on? The remaining 3 celestial kings were dumbfounded. Even Ling Gaoyuan was surprised. No matter how much the other party despised him, there was no need to use such a method, right? Ling Feizhou, is there any meaning in secretly bullying a junior? Said the 8th heaven celestial king, his voice rumbling. When Ling Gaoyuan heard this, he realized that his father had taken action. His face was filled with surprise. Could it be that his father had broken through? But he clearly didn't see the heavenly tribulation descend, so why did his father enter the 7th heaven without a sound? Scram! Ling Han said, his voice spreading in all directions. It was impossible for an celestial king to discover his location. A mere 6th heaven celestial king really knows how to boast. The 8th heaven celestial king snorted coldly. He struck out with his palm and slammed it downwards. An 8th heaven celestial king could easily raise Western Desert Mountain to the ground. Sir, why must you be so overbearing? A figure flew out from the mountains and struck out with a huge palm. This was Ling Feizhou. But how could a mere 6th heaven celestial king match the might of an 8th heaven celestial king? Ling Han shook his head and secretly flicked his finger. Boom! In the sky, the huge palm collided with the 8th heaven celestial king's attack. Both sides were instantly annihilated. Everyone was astonished. Chapter 2964. This kind of feeling was vague, and he could only determine the direction, but could not pinpoint the exact location. A large city appeared ahead, and according to Ling Han's estimation, his bloodline descendants were in this city. It seemed to have greatly shrunk the scope, but how big was a city? It was even many times larger than a star in the ancient realm, and he had to find a clan to do so. It was difficult. Thankfully, Ling Han was not an ordinary person, but a heavenly venerable, and more so possessed battle prowess of level 6. There were too many things that he could do. He inquired about the location of the Ling family. This city was called Anya City, and there were 7 Ling family in the city. Ling Han visited them one by one. What he wanted to do was very simple. He wanted to find a member of the Ling family, let out a bit of blood, and then sense it. If it was his bloodline descendant, there would naturally be a resonance, no matter how faint. No. He went to 5 clans in a row, and all of them were filled with anticipation, yet he returned disappointed. The 3 of them arrived at the 6th Ling family. Among the 7 Ling family, this Ling family was the weakest, and the strongest was only a severing mundane tier. This could barely be considered a force. Otherwise, those who were not in the severing mundane tier were not qualified to form a force at all. Ling Duanyun, if you still have some self-awareness, then stop pestering Fairy Cheng. You are not worthy at all. Before Ling Han had entered, he saw that there was a conflict nearby. There was only one person on one side, and he looked to be about 20 years old. His appearance was considerably handsome, but his cultivation level was only at the heavenly body tier. In the Xian Mo realm, this was completely insignificant. The other side had much more people, a total of 7 people. The difference in cultivation level was very large, and there was also a heavenly body tier, but the strongest was at the severing mundane tier. The words just now were said by that severing mundane tier. This was a young man dressed in azure luxurious clothing, looking down at the only young man, Ling Duanyun. Ling Duanyun humphed, but did not cower in the face of a severing mundane tier. Whether I am worthy of CC or not has nothing to do with you. In any case, it has nothing to do with you. That severing mundane tier youth was instantly enraged, and he glared intently at Ling Duanyun, looking like he was about to attack. He really dared to do so because the strongest elite of the Ling clan was only a 3rd severance, and though he was a 1st severance, there was an immortal palace tier grand elder in the clan, so he could completely crush him. So what if he had beaten Ling Duanyun? Though he was no match for a 3rd severance, he could still leave calmly. Furthermore, what were severing mundane tier forces worth in front of immortal palace tier forces? They could only bow their heads in submission. Ling Duanyun said carelessly, "Dog ignores, do you dare to have a battle with me at the same cultivation level? If you can defeat me, you can do whatever you want to me." "How dare you? Young Master Go's name is Go Li." A subordinate immediately chimed in from behind the severing mundane youth. Fine. A dog's reasoning will always be correct, right? Ling Duanyun readily accepted his advice. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. If this Ling family were the descendants of his bloodline, then Ling Duanyun really did resemble him in the past, and his ability to harm others was impressive. Go Li's gaze was cold. "Why should I lower myself to fight with a nobody like you? Qingping, go and fight with him." "All right." A young man who was similarly in the heavenly body tier walked out. He crooked a finger at Ling Duanyun. "Come, I'll play with you." This person was called Lu Qingping, and he came from a small severing mundane tier clan that was attached to the Go clan. Thus, he naturally became Go Li's follower. Ling Duanyun clasped his right hand behind his back. "I won't bully you either. I'll let you use only one hand." "You!" Lu Qingping instantly exploded in fury. "You actually underestimate me." He immediately charged out. "Shameless boasting, see if I don't beat you into dregs." After a few moves, Lu Qingping retreated, but he didn't walk back by himself. Rather, he was knocked to the ground by a punch and slid back. "How was it?" Ling Duanyun rubbed his nose, full of provocation. Even Ling Han nodded internally. This brat's strength was really not bad. His foundation was especially solid, and his future was very promising. Go Li instantly felt embarrassed and shouted loudly, "Rulong, you go." "Young Master Go, isn't this asking me to bully the weak?" a tall and sturdy young man said with a smile. But while that was what he said, he had already walked out and stood in front of Ling Duanyun like an iron tower. Ling Duanyun couldn't help but show a solemn expression. This person was not in the heavenly body tier, but rather in the eternal river tier. In terms of cultivation level, he completely crushed him. He was very strong, and there were almost no opponents in a battle of the same cultivation level, but asking him to cross over a major tier to battle? That was too much of a stretch. It was completely impossible. "Brat, if you can take 3 punches from me, I'll admit that you've won." The tall and sturdy young man moved and shot out a punch, heavy and fast. Ling Duanyun couldn't possibly dodge at all, and could only cross his arms in front of him to block. Struck by the punch, he staggered and involuntarily retreated 17 steps. He felt as if his chest was boiling, and blood was already seeping out of the corner of his mouth. "Not bad, taking a punch from me, and actually still being able to stand," the tall and sturdy young man said with a laugh. Brother Rulong is famous for his iron fists. His fists have been soaked in spiritual medicine since he was young, and fused with godly metal, so they are incredibly frightening. There are not many in the same cultivation level that can take a punch from Brother Rulong's iron fists. One strike is enough to break one's bones. "Brat, quickly kneel and beg for mercy." A few young men behind Go Li called out one after another, but there were also 2 who were more reserved. They crossed their arms, looking disdainful. Because they were stronger than that tall and sturdy young man, they naturally wouldn't mind. "Come, take my second punch," the tall and sturdy young man said with a grin. "Hold on," Ling Han spoke up and walked out. Previously, Ling Duanyun had spilled blood, and he was already sure that this was his descendant. Bullying his descendant, fuck. "And who are you?" a young man shouted at Ling Han with a foul mouth. "Pa." The Empress moved and gave that person a slap across the air. The sound was crisp and clear, and that person spun a dozen or so times on the spot. Only then did he sit down on the ground, completely dumbfounded. He didn't die, naturally, because the Empress saw that Ling Han had no intention of killing him, and so only used a bit of strength. Otherwise, the heavenly venerable only had to release a bit of his aura, and everyone here would be shaken into bloody foam. Hee. Hunyo meanwhile left. Seeing that Ling Han and his group seemed to have a powerful background, Go Li immediately asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" "Who I am, you don't need to know," Ling Han said calmly, and beckoned at Ling Duanyun. "Brat, come here, I'll teach you a few moves on how to defeat that ugly big guy." Ugly big guy. The tall and sturdy young man couldn't help but be so angry that smoke was about to come out of his nose. Though he was a bit sturdy, it had nothing to do with being ugly. However, Ling Han and his group immediately gained the upper hand with a show of strength, so he dared not act rashly and forcibly endured it. Ling Duanyun was very quick-witted. He didn't know exactly how strong Ling Han was, but he seemed to be very awesome. He said, "Senior, there's no need to go through so much trouble. You can just defeat all of them in one go, especially that dog Neglectful. He's the most savage in human form, so you definitely have to give him a good beating." End of this chapter. Chapter 2965. Ling Duanyun. Go Li immediately shouted, "What are you shouting for? I'm right in front of you, and I'm not deaf." Ling Duanyun picked at his ears, looking really very annoying. Ling Han, however, smiled. He was being bullied right in front of his house, so what need was there to be polite? This brat had guts, and was also quick-witted, not holding back with his words. He really had his former glory, which he liked very much. "I'll teach you for an hour, and guarantee that you can defeat this ugly big guy," Ling Han said. "How about it? Watching others fight or fighting yourself, which is more satisfying?" "Senior, are you sure you're not joking?" Ling Duanyun naturally did not believe that an hour could help him surpass the eternal river tier. Was he joking? Ling Han smiled calmly. "There is only one chance. You can choose to accept it or not." Ling Duanyun hesitated slightly, then suddenly gritted his teeth and bowed to Ling Han. Senior, please teach me. This brat was not bad. He was decisive and not the slightest bit sloppy. Ling Han nodded and raised a hand. Stand up. He had never liked this kind of etiquette. Respect came from the heart and not on the surface. He then looked at Go Li and the others. You guys wait for an hour. Go Li was naturally not willing to wait, but though Ling Han and the others did not show their aura, they had the upper hand. He could not catch the Empress's move, and knew that his strength was far from enough. Thus, they said to wait, and he did not dare to wait. Furthermore, he did not believe that in a mere hour, Ling Duanyun could really be reborn. Unless he had taken a celestial medicine, Ling Han casually took out a few pills, and tossed them at Ling Duanyun. Eat them. There really were celestial pills. Ling Duanyun looked at these pale gray alchemical pills, and his heart involuntarily pounded. This appearance was too bad, right? Could it really be eaten? What if he ate it and had diarrhea? But seeing Ling Han's completely indifferent expression, as well as his strong desire to personally defeat the burly young man, he gritted his teeth and tossed all 3 pills into his mouth. He did not even chew, and directly swallowed them. Seeing this scene, Go Li and the others all laughed loudly. The higher the level of the pill, the more dazzling and extraordinary it would be. Of course, divine medicines were extraordinary. Those pills could also be considered precious medicines. Are you kidding me? They knew that they were not a match for Ling Han and the other 2, but bullying Ling Duanyun was not a problem at all. Ling Han pressed a finger onto Ling Duanyun's forehead. He did not need to use any mighty force at all. He drew upon the supreme regulations and accelerated the flow of time around Ling Duanyun. He was strong enough to become a heavenly venerable tier, and regulations were already ineffective against him, but Ling Duanyun was only in the heavenly body tier, so the acceleration of the flow of time was naturally effective. 2 million times acceleration. What does this mean? An hour had passed in the outside world, but over 200 years had passed in his world. Isn't that awesome enough? Ling Han did not directly increase Ling Duanyun's cultivation. On the contrary, he dispersed all of Ling Duanyun's cultivation, then rebuilt his foundation and cultivated back step by step. In the outside world, time passed without anyone noticing. But Ling Duanyun knew what he had experienced. He could not help but be shocked. What kind of heaven-defying method did this senior possess to disperse his cultivation, rebuild his foundation, and rebuild his cultivation? He discovered that over 100 years' time had already passed quietly, but the movements of those people outside had slowed down to the extreme, as if time had stopped. This was a different flow of time. But Ling Han casually pointed, and did not use any formation, and accelerated his flow of time by who knew how many times, and Go Li and the others actually did not notice at all. This ability was really freaking awesome. He had met an expert, a benefactor. He hurriedly retracted his divine sense, and focused on cultivation. If he missed such a good opportunity, there might not be a next time. This is the indestructible heaven scroll, memorize it well. Ling Han transmitted a divine sense, which rumbled in Ling Duanyun's mind. He was now already at the 6th level, so inheriting the indestructible heaven scroll was naturally a piece of cake, but whether Ling Duanyun could comprehend it or not was another matter. It could be said that it was difficult. He helped Ling Duanyun build his foundation and forge his godly bones and celestial body. Possessing the highest regulations, and more so grasping the essential power of 3 origin worlds, to achieve this was still a piece of cake. An hour passed very quickly. Ling Han withdrew his finger and said, "Go fight." "Yes, senior," Ling Duanyun said extremely respectfully. Go Li and the others might not have noticed anything at all, but he was extremely clear on just how powerful this senior was. His achievements were practically unimaginable. Go Li and the others all smirked coldly. You guys really knew how to act together. Just by pressing a finger, you could create a super elite. Hee really hee. Brat, come quickly, I'm already impatient from waiting, the tall and sturdy young man urged. See how I thrash you. Ling Duanyun shouted softly, and took the initiative to attack. Puny heavenly body tier, the tall and sturdy young man said in disdain. He clenched his fist and punched towards Ling Duanyun. Pung, the two of them exchanged a blow, and an unbelievable scene appeared. Tang tang, both of them retreated a dozen steps. Ling Duanyun actually did not fall into a disadvantage at all. This, Go Li and the others were all speechless in shock. How was this possible? How was this possible? A mere hour, and with just a press of a finger he could make one's abilities completely different. Ling Duanyun was clearly still in the heavenly body tier, and had not improved at all, so how did he suddenly become so powerful? They all turned to look at Ling Han. This was naturally all because of Ling Han. What kind of being was this? The might of a single finger was actually so terrifying. At the same time, they were also filled with envy. Why did such a good opportunity not fall on their heads? Those few pills. Go Li and the others all came to a realization. Those must be celestial medicines, to be able to make one reborn. Perhaps foundation building saintly medicine. There is clearly no change in cultivation level, but his abilities have increased innumerable times. This is 10,000 times, 100 million times more precious than directly increasing cultivation level. How much one's cultivation level increased was how much. This was a one-time transaction, but strengthening one's foundation was something that would last a lifetime, and one could benefit forever. Again, the tall and sturdy young man charged over again. So what if Ling Han's power rivaled his? His iron fists had been tempered by godly metal and spirit medicines since he was young, and possessed the property of breaking through everything. Let him beat this brat to death. Pung, 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 he brandished his fists, and struck toward Ling Duanyun. Seeing the rain of attacks from his opponent, added with the fact that his strength had just increased, Ling Duanyun still subconsciously thought that Eternal River Tier elites were people that he could not match at present. He hurriedly dodged, not daring to face them head-on. Go Li and the others all nodded in agreement. Heavenly Body Tier was only the Heavenly Body Tier, after all. Ling Han shook his head. What's there to be afraid of? Don't you dare to fight? Ling Duanyun could not help but feel arrogant. He thought, didn't I also not fall into a disadvantageous position when I took a blow from the burly young man head-on? Come. He didn't retreat any longer, and threw out a punch to meet it head-on. Chapter 2966. Hong Hong Hong. Ling Duanyun and the burly young man continued to exchange blows, no longer retreating, and clashed head-on with every blow. Even if their power is about the same, Brother Long's fists are tempered with spirit medicine and godly metal, equivalent to a god tool. Clashing head-on with him is really an extraordinarily stupid decision. Just wait and see all his bones shatter. Ha! Go Li and the others all laughed loudly, not doubting the sturdiness of the burly young man's fists. Even Go Li had to admit that if they battled at the same cultivation level, he wouldn't dare to clash head-on with the burly young man's fists. However, to cultivate such an iron fist, who knew how much suffering one had to go through, and there really weren't many that could endure it. After exchanging over 100 blows in a row, someone's fist indeed bled, but it wasn't Ling Duanyun, but that burly young man. The burly young man screamed in pain. The surface of his fist was a bloody mess, and one could even see a strange depression. Obviously, his bones had been forcefully shattered in the exchange of blows. This, Go Li and the others were all dumbfounded. They couldn't imagine, that iron fist like a dragon would actually be beaten so badly. Meanwhile, Ling Duanyun was filled with heroism, and with a battle cry, he launched a fierce counterattack. One had to know, though he couldn't possibly comprehend the indestructible heaven scroll in one go, his body had been slightly strengthened by Ling Han's essential particles, so how strong could his physique reach? If he used the full power of 6 steps, he could even raise a mortal to the 9th heaven level in a short period of time, but the disadvantage of that was that he couldn't advance any further. Ling Duanyun had huge room for improvement, so Ling Han naturally wouldn't spoil things through excessive enthusiasm. Fight, fight, fight. The burly young man no longer had the courage to fight head-on. Being defeated in the field that he was most proficient in made his confidence fall to rock bottom, and he no longer had any fighting spirit. After a few exchanges, he was sent flying by a single punch from Ling Duanyun, completely defeated. Though the burly young man's defeat was only a matter of time, when they really saw him defeated, Go Li and the others still felt incredulous. Senior is really skilled. A young man walked out and respectfully bowed towards Ling Han. I am Kong Xing, and would also like to seek guidance from Ling Duanyun. He was also in the Eternal River tier, but he was much more powerful than the burly youth. He was almost at the peak stage of the Eternal River tier. For him to be so respectful, firstly, it was true that Ling Han's methods were heaven-defying, so he had no choice but to be careful. Secondly, he also harbored a selfish motive. If Ling Han was one of those powerful cultivators who had traveled the world, and had only helped Ling Duanyun out of a whim, would such a good fortune land on his head? Therefore, he behaved very respectfully, hoping that Ling Han would like him and give him a finger or something. Ling Duanyun looked at Ling Han. Right now, his fighting spirit was very strong. Ling Han shook his head. Ling Duanyun's present physique was indeed strong, and it would be very difficult for even Genesis tiers to kill him, but power was his weakness. He definitely could not defeat Kong Xing. There was a whole major tier between them. I will teach you for another hour, he said to Ling Duanyun. Ling Duanyun was naturally overjoyed. It had only been an hour just now, and his abilities had already undergone a qualitative leap. If another hour were to pass, how impressive would he be? Many thanks, Senior. He bowed again. Go Li and the others were all envious as they watched. They, too, wanted very much to bow before Ling Han and beg him to teach them a thing or two. Unfortunately, Ling Han paid them no heed at all, and only tossed out a single sentence. You guys wait for another hour. Ling Han tapped out a finger and pressed it on Ling Duanyun's forehead. Boom, an astonishing aura suddenly surged out from Ling Duanyun's body, seething and roaring. How could this be possible? His cultivation level is currently rising, and this speed is astonishingly fast. Go Li and the others all exclaimed in shock. This was really too inconceivable. Even if he had eaten a celestial medicine, he could still be so fierce? A little less than an hour passed. Quang, a sudden clap of thunder rang out between heaven and earth. Thunderclouds rolled, and the heavenly tribulation was about to arrive. He suddenly broke through, Go Li and the others murmured, looking as if they had seen a ghost. With a single tap of the finger, he broke through to the Eternal River tier. How could they believe this? Though those below the Severing Mundane tier could not be considered elites, even in the Xuanma plane, taking this step would at least take 100 years, right? For those with inferior talent, it would not be strange for them to take tens of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Go and undergo the tribulation first, Ling Han said. Ling Duanyun hurriedly answered, and went to face the heavenly tribulation. Quang, 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 the heavenly tribulation descended, causing considerable injuries to Ling Duanyun. It's about time to stop, Ling Han said to the skies. We are in a hurry. Wang, the thunderclouds moved, and actually quickly disappeared. Go Li and the others were really shocked. Who the fuck were you? You opened your mouth, and even the heavenly tribulation dissipated. How could they know that there was a power unique to the Xuanma plane in Ling Han's body? This could even develop into a second Xuanma plane in future, and his connection with the Xuanma plane was far greater than any other person. He had already reached the high level of regulations, and with such a connection, he naturally had plenty of face. The heaven and earth also had to be given. Thus, the heavenly tribulation dissipated. In any case, it had already struck a few times, so even if it was only symbolic, it was enough. Ling Duanyun was also stunned beyond comprehension. He was clearer than anyone else about Ling Han's strength, but when he saw this scene he still could not help but be speechless. Awesome, too awesome. He felt that he was really lucky, actually being able to obtain the favor of an elite of this level. All right, go and fight. Ling Han waved his hand. Yes, Senior. Ling Duanyun was even more respectful. He first bowed to Ling Han, and then walked towards Kong Xing. Come. Kong Xing's first reaction was to not fight. Fuck, in front of Ling Han he did not even have the courage to stand. He was so scared that his legs had gone soft, so how could he still fight? But when he thought of the good fortune that Ling Duanyun had obtained, he gritted his teeth. He also wanted it. In this battle, if he performed outstandingly, would he win Ling Han's appreciation and thus give him a hand in passing? With this thought, he leaped out. "Come, let me experience it." The two of them immediately began to fight. They were both in the Eternal River tier, but one was in the peak stage of the Eternal River tier, while the other had just entered the Eternal River tier. In theory, the gap between them should be as wide as the sky, and there was no suspense about the outcome. But Ling Duanyun defied common sense. His power was only slightly inferior to Kang Xing's, yet his physique was invincible, as if it were divine metal. Only Ling Duanyun could attack, and did not need to defend at all. What use was that tiny bit of power advantage that Kang Xing had? After exchanging over 1,000 blows, he was also sent flying by a single punch from Ling Duanyun, defeated. Who else? Ling Duanyun looked around, appearing very domineering. Go Li and the others all cursed in their minds. If it were not for their relationship with Ling Han, a mere heavenly body tier, there were at least 4 people here that could easily thrash him. Especially Go Li, severing mundane tier elites did not need to move at all, and could kill him with a single thought. I too will experience it. Among Go Li's group, a young man stood out. He was in the Genesis tier, and was already a great saint. Ling Duanyun looked towards Ling Han. 1 hour. End of this chapter. Chapter 2968. Ideal. Ling Duanyun murmured. He thought for a moment. I want to become a strong practitioner, protect the clan, and bring the Ling family to greater heights. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, then what kind of realm can one be considered an expert? Ling Duanyun pondered again. In his heart, he naturally hoped that he could become a supreme elite like the Celestial King tier, but the problem was, with the decline of the Ling family, he was currently only in the Heavenly Body tier, the Genesis tier, so how far away was he from the Celestial King tier? Becoming an immortal king was definitely not a dream, but a fantasy. Dividing soul realm, he said after pondering for a moment. A dividing soul tier could already be considered a powerful force in Yi City. This was because the first-rate forces only had immortal palace tier elites, and there were merely 6 of them. Ling Han smiled faintly. Ling Duanyun did not boast about becoming a celestial king, ascending origin tier, or anything like that. This was very real. Although Ling Han could casually create celestial kings, this group of people could be regarded as top-notch experts in any plane, and their numbers were pitifully small. A measly severing mundane force actually wanted to produce a celestial king? This was not an ideal, but an overestimation of one's capabilities. Splitting the soul can only allow the Ling family to gain a foothold in Anya City. It's not enough to dominate, let alone make a name for themselves in the Xuanma Plain. Ling Han said. He paused for a moment before asking, in your eyes, what should the cultivation level of a peak expert be? Immortal king? Ling Duanyun nodded vigorously. Which practitioner did not wish to become a celestial king? Immortal kings truly transcended, no longer fearing the calamity of immortals, evergreen through the ages, eternally imperishable. Ling Han laughed. What if I told you that there's another realm above the immortal king realm called the Celestial Master Realm? What would you think? Celestial Sovereign. Ling Duanyun mumbled. His mouth was wide open, and his face was filled with disbelief. For a long time, all he had heard and known were legends about the Celestial King. This was a realm that people could only look up to. Out of 100 million, out of 1 trillion cultivators, there could only be one Celestial King. Only this was worthy of the power of a Celestial King. However, Ling Han said that there was actually a realm above the Celestial King realm. There are beings even more powerful than immortal kings. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't accept it. What do you think my cultivation level is? Ling Han asked. Celestial King, Ling Duanyun said with great certainty. Ling Han smiled, and with a thought, a strange glow appeared on his body. However, it quickly became 8, then 3, and then 9. It was constantly changing, almost as if he were performing a magic trick. Ling Duanyun was instantly dumbfounded. Who didn't know that it was impossible to change the radiance of an immortal king? This was a unique characteristic. Immortal kings could only display this radiance based on the number of heavens they had. The only thing an immortal king could do was to either display it or not display it. What the hell was he seeing now? The empress couldn't help but smile, and Hunyeo, meanwhile, laughed loudly. She had long since held her belly in laughter. Ling Han spoke, "I am not an immortal king, but a heavenly venerable." Immortal kings use the rules to be equal to heaven and earth. But Empyreans surpass the rules. Even the heavens have to respect them. Do you want to become a celestial king or a heavenly venerable? Ling Han looked at Ling Duanyun. If you want to become a celestial king, I can help you advance into this cultivation level with a wave of my hand, but if you want to become a heavenly venerable, you need to make every step solidly and solidly. Otherwise, if your cultivation is not up to standard in any aspect, you will never be able to become a heavenly venerable. Just as Ling Duanyun had said, only one celestial king could emerge from 1,000,000,000 people, and there might not even be one heavenly venerable among 1,000,000,000 celestial kings. Ling Duanyun couldn't help but look fascinated. Even the heavens had to respect them. How powerful was that? Can I really become such an elite? He asked, slightly at a loss. He couldn't be blamed for not being confident. For a tiny severing mundane clan, reaching the dividing soul tier was a distant dream. What more a heavenly venerable that was one level above celestial king? Ling Han said, "I cannot guarantee that you will definitely become a heavenly venerable. What I can give you is the path that leads to a supreme elite. If you really have the ability, you can walk over it. If not, then celestial king will be your final destination." Ling Duanyun hesitated for a moment, and his gaze suddenly became resolute. "Master, please accept a bow from your disciple." He knelt down. Ling Han calmly accepted his bow. He was a descendant of his own, so it was natural for him to pay respects to this ancestor of his, but to take a disciple, did you want to mess up the seniority? Stand up, I will teach you how to cultivate, but there is no need to take a disciple. Ling Duanyun was dumbfounded at this moment. Hunyeo slapped the back of this brat's head. "Foolish brat, this is your ancestor. If he takes you as a disciple, wouldn't the seniority of the Ling family be messed up?" Ling Duanyun finally came to his senses, and couldn't help but rub his head and smile foolishly. "Begin." With a casual sweep of Ling Han's hand, Ling Duanyun's cultivation level was completely obliterated, and he became an ordinary person. "Start from the beginning, and build your foundation with the indestructible heaven scroll." Ling Han boosted Ling Duanyun with the acceleration of the flow of time. With the flow of time as high as 2,000,000 times, Ling Duanyun's cultivation speed was naturally astonishing. In merely one day, he had already returned to the heavenly body tier. In the outside world, it was one day, but to him, it was a long 5,000 years. This was even longer than the total time he had cultivated since he was born. After finishing this day of cultivation, Ling Duanyun's state had completely changed. There was a sliver of age in his eyes, but there was more determination and confidence. He had rebuilt his foundation and cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll. In a battle of equals, his battle prowess was indescribably strong. Ling Han didn't let Ling Duanyun continue to cultivate. Accelerating the flow of time was actually not good. After all, it would destroy the normal regulations of heaven and earth. It was fine if the time was short, but if it was too long, the drawbacks would be infinitely magnified. Thus, Ling Duanyun continued to go to his martial arts academy. Ling Han knew that this brat still had a confidant, and now was the time when they were in a heated relationship. He would miss her if he didn't see her for a day, what more when under the acceleration of the flow of time, over 5,000 years had already passed. If he was allowed to cultivate for another 5,000 years or so, this brat would probably rebel. Ling Han, too, had his own plans. He wanted to see how many people the Ling family still had that were worth nurturing. He definitely wouldn't elevate every single one of them just because they were his descendants, no matter what their character was like. Even if he had enough resources in his hands, he still wouldn't do that. Additionally, he also wanted to know the situation of Ling Jianshui, Ling Shi, and the others, and what exactly had happened to them. Of course, the most important thing was that Ling Han still had to temper himself in the mortal world so that his Tao heart would be clear, and he could comprehend the fourth essential particle, advancing to the fifth step. As long as he had battle prowess of the seventh step, he would naturally be able to do as he pleased in the world. With his support, the Ling family could live forever and never be extinguished. Finally, Ling Han still had to look for other descendants. The Ling family in Yi City was only one branch. Chapter 2969. The Xian Mo plane was very big. After swallowing the other 9 high-level planes and upgrading it to a super high-level plane, the territory of the Xian Mo plane had increased by at least 10 times. Even with Ling Han's strength at the 6 steps, it was still destined to be a difficult task to find his descendants in this vast sea of people. This was not like going one round around the Xian Mo plane, but to search each area. Even if Ling Han used the bloodline connection to filter out most of them, it was still a huge project. He still had to guide Ling Duanyun, and did not have so much time for him to squander like this. Ling Han thought for a while, and decided to guide Ling Duanyun peacefully for the time being. When this guy had some small achievements, he would leave to search for his descendants. Actually, the simplest way was for him to advance to the 5 steps and become invincible in the world. Then, the Ling family would be able to stand in the world again. Then, with a call, the descendants would naturally come running over. It was just that there would definitely be imposters among them, and he would need to use his bloodline to identify them. But comparatively speaking, this amount of work would be much smaller. After making up his mind, Ling Han settled down here peacefully and became an ordinary person. After the first day ended, Ling Duanyun came to find him. This guy's face was full of excitement, and he said, "Ancestor, that guy ignored dog completely forgot about yesterday's matter today, and wanted to find trouble with me again. In the end, I defeated his underlings in 2 or 3 moves. You didn't see the expression on his face at that time, it was really wonderful." Ling Han smiled faintly, "That's so interesting. Then, I'll go and join in the fun tomorrow." Ling Duanyun was instantly dumbfounded. "You're already a sky sovereign, and you still want to go to the Martial Arts Institute to act cool?" Ling Han did not explain. He no longer needed to cultivate his body. What he needed to temper was his mind, allowing him to complete a sublimation, break through the shackles in one go, and sense the 4th type of essential power. This kind of tempering of the mind was not restricted by form. It was done at will and let nature take its course. "Come, let's continue cultivating." Ling Han grabbed Ling Duanyun. Previously, Ling Duanyun was only recultivating, and the process could not be said to be arduous. But from today onwards, he would let this guy know what was called the difficulty of cultivation. If you don't suffer, how can you survive the life and death situation? Ling Duanyun began a painful journey of cultivation. It looked like it had only been a single night, but in truth, he had spent over 100 years. He had been trained like a dog by Ling Han, causing him to cry for his parents and howl in pain. The next morning, he looked at Ling Han with a bitter and vengeful gaze, as if they were mortal enemies. However, his cultivation level had advanced to the peak stage of the heavenly body tier at an incredibly stable and solid pace. He would be able to advance to the eternal river tier after a slight period of consolidation. "Let's go to the martial courtyard." On a whim, Ling Han decided to go to the martial academy with Ling Duanyun. He wanted to change his frame of mind and give up on his utilitarian thoughts. Perhaps he might be able to gain some enlightenment. There were many martial arts academies in Yi City, and this was called the Jianan Branch Academy. It was a branch of the Jianan Martial Arts Academy, and the strongest elite in the branch academy was only in the Severing Mundane tier. Moreover, they were not here every day. They would only appear once every 10 days or half a month, or even once every few years, to give some guidance. It couldn't be helped. Firstly, a Severing Mundane tier could be called an ancestor, and secondly, there were only a few Severing Mundane tier students in the Martial Arts Academy, so there was no need to teach them every day. After the 2 of them arrived at the Martial Arts Academy, Ling Duanyun went to register with Ling Han. To enter the Jianan Branch Academy, one did not need to have any outstanding talent in martial art. They only needed to pay the money. What they accepted here was naturally star stones. Ling Han casually tossed out a pile of star stones, causing the people in the office of enrollment to stare at him as if they were looking at a monster. This guy was so rich. Ling Duanyun's eyes swept over, a cold, mocking smirk curling up the corners of his lips. There would definitely be people here who were envious and had evil intentions, wanting to make a move on Ling Han. But whoever made a move would regret it for the rest of their lives. This was an existence even more awesome than a celestial king. The ancestor was indeed here to show off, and more importantly, he did not have to worry about being struck by lightning when he did so. Even the heavenly tribulation would listen to him. Cultivation level, birth, name. A person was responsible for registering Ling Han's information. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, Genesis tier, lone cultivator, Han Lin. When they heard this, everyone glanced at Ling Han. A mere Genesis tier was practically a piece of cake. Furthermore, he was a lone cultivator, so there was no need to worry that he would suffer revenge after killing him and robbing him. Go on. After registering Ling Han's information, the two of them left. Ling Duanyun brought Ling Han around. This place was still quite big, having a huge mountain. The spiritual qi on the mountain was obviously abundant, and there was also a formation that gathered spiritual qi. However, if one wanted to cultivate on the mountain, it was definitely not something that just anyone could do. Either they were geniuses that were recognized by the Martial Arts Academy, or they were descendants of famous clans. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry could only be envious. The Ling family could not be considered a famous clan, but Ling Duanyun was a prodigy, so he naturally had the right to cultivate on the mountain. Additionally, as long as one was willing to pay, they could similarly ascend the mountain, but the cost was not cheap. Very few people could afford this price. Ling Han and Ling Duanyun arrived at the foot of the mountain together. Halt! The two of them were just about to ascend the mountain, but were stopped by someone. Ling Duanyun said to Ling Han in a low voice, Ancestor, you are deliberately acting cool. No, you are deeply hidden. No one knows how freakish you are, so you have to pay the money to ascend the mountain. Ling Han nodded. The main purpose of ascending the mountain was to see what kind of person Cheng Sisi was. He paid a star stone, which could allow him to cultivate on the mountain for 10 days. He could choose to stay for 10 days in one go, or he could register as many times as he came. Halt! The two of them were just about to take a step, but were stopped again. Ninth brother, you want to earn some extra money again? Ling Duanyun looked towards that guard. This was an old man of the Martial Arts Academy, and he would often play some tricks to extort students. That guard snickered. I have always acted strictly according to the rules of the Martial Arts Academy, so don't wrongly accuse me. Then why are you stopping us? Ling Duanyun asked. Not you guys, but you. That guard pointed at Ling Duanyun. Ling Duanyun was surprised. Why are you stopping me? Because I just received a notice from the Martial Arts Academy this morning that your qualifications as a key student have been revoked. So, if you want to ascend the mountain, you have to pay. The guard said in a downplayed tone. His eyes glanced at Ling Duanyun, and his tone was filled with disdain. Ling Duanyun was startled at first, and then he flew into a rage. Why are my qualifications as a key student revoked? What rules of the Martial Arts Academy did I violate? I don't know about this, I am just acting according to orders. If you have any dissatisfaction, you can go and report it to the Martial Arts Academy yourself. That guard snickered. Ignoring dog, it must be him. Ling Duanyun immediately said. Ling Han threw a star stone towards that guard, and then said to Ling Duanyun, let's go, ascend the mountain. Ling Duanyun nodded. This goalie was really sinister, because Cheng Sisi was definitely cultivating on the mountain, and he wanted to separate the two of them. Chapter 2970. The Cheng family was a great clan in Anya City. Not only did they have an immortal palace tier elite, they were also super elites of the Fifth Secret, and were the #1 clan in Anya City. With such a background, no matter how slow and stupid Cheng Sisi was, she could easily obtain the right to cultivate on the mountain. Moreover, she was a direct descendant of the main bloodline, and also possessed extraordinary cultivation talent. She was a princess-like star, and was always surrounded by others. No one would have thought that Qing Sisi would be interested in Ling Duanyun. Though it was only interest now, it was already enough to make some people feel uneasy. For example, Go Li. The Go clan was also an immortal palace tier force, but was slightly weaker than the Qing family, and the strongest elite of the clan was the fourth secret. Furthermore, though Go Li was also a direct descendant, he still had two cousins above him, and both of them were more outstanding than him. The cultivation resources in the clan were naturally more inclined towards these two. Thus, Go Li was naturally very concerned about Qing Sisi and wanted to marry this little princess. This way, his status in the Go clan would definitely rise, and the Qing family would definitely take care of him. Now that Ling Duanyun and Qing Sisi were a little close, it was completely reasonable for Go Li to play a dirty trick and reduce the chances of the meeting. In Go Li's opinion, though Ling Duanyun was also a young master of the Ling family, the situation of the Ling family had been deteriorating in recent years, and the star stones in Ling Duanyun's hands were definitely pitifully few. If he had to cultivate on the mountain at his own expense, that would definitely cause him great heartache. Furthermore, it was fine once or twice, but after a long time, what money would he have left? This trick of Go Li was very dirty, but also very effective. Once the time of meeting was reduced, any affection would slowly disappear. The two of them ascended the mountain. There were various formations here, and most of the formations had people sitting cross-legged inside, cultivating. Ling Duanyun looked along the way. He was looking for Qing Sisi. When they reached the top of the mountain, they saw a man and a woman currently conversing, and one of them was precisely Go Li. Ask for Q small to say, net ask for Nichi. The other woman wore a long green dress and put on some makeup, causing her originally alluring face to appear even more exquisite. Her figure was also very tall, and was not much shorter than Go Li. They were more or less the same height. Her face was filled with pride, like a little princess. Indeed, in the whole of Anyi city, she was fully deserving of her title as a princess, because she was Qing Sisi, the eldest daughter of the Qing family. When Ling Duanyun saw this, he hurriedly called out, "Miss Qing." Then he ran over. He did not even care about his ancestor, which made Ling Han shake his head. It looked like this brat had really placed his attention on Qing Sisi. He watched from the side without batting an eyelid. Go Li was not surprised by Ling Duanyun's appearance. No matter how poor this guy was, he would still be able to take out a few star stones. You can do it once or twice, but what about 3, 4, 10, 8 times? Oh, it's you. Qing Sisi glanced at Ling Duanyun and nodded. I was just about to look for you to discuss this move, autumn breeze brushing leaves. Ling Duanyun hurriedly nodded, and a smile blossomed on his face. Ling Han watched from the side and couldn't help but shake his head inwardly. From the looks of it, this was Razor's hot-headedness. Although Ling Duanyun was very attentive to her, this young lady Qing did not have much enthusiasm. Most likely, Qing Sisi usually treated others too coldly and arrogantly, so even if she treated Ling Duanyun a little better, Go Li would think that there was some kind of relationship between them. In fact, he was really overreacting. In Qing Sisi's eyes, Ling Duanyun's background was really too lowly. It might be possible for him to be a playmate, but when it came to becoming a couple, she would definitely not be interested in him. It wasn't impossible to rule out that there were some young ladies from prestigious families who didn't have such snobbish eyes, but there were too few of them, and Ling Han didn't think that the one in front of him was one of them. Qiu Qiu Xiaoshua shabby. Speaking of autumn breeze brushing leaves, I happen to have some opinions as well. Why don't we discuss it together? Go Li said. He could not help but look at Ling Han a few more times. He always felt that this fellow gave him an indescribable chill. Strange, they have clearly not seen each other before. Why do I have such a feeling? Could it be that this person has an evil face? But who is he? How could a severing mundane ancestor feel a chill in his heart just because of someone's frightening appearance? Strange. Then let's do it together. Qing Sisi did not wait for Ling Duanyun to express his opinion, and directly made her decision. Ling Han once again shook his head internally. This girl really did not take Ling Duanyun to heart. Otherwise, even if she did not reject him outright at this moment, she should have tactfully expressed that she did not welcome Go Li. Ling Duanyun fell into the trap and did not blame Cheng Sisi for her thoughts. He only felt that Go Li was too unclear. Thus, the three of them began to discuss together. This so-called autumn breeze brushing leaves was a sword technique that was filled with variations. It was something that they had just learned, and they had to completely master it in the stipulated time. Ling Duanyun and Go Li were both competing to show off. Their mouths were chattering non-stop, and their hands were also gesturing with their swords, like two male peacocks competing to show off. Ling Han listened from the side, and couldn't help but yawn. He had long since jumped out of the category of techniques, so he naturally had no interest. Wrong, the variation of this technique should be from bottom to top, and not from top to bottom, Go Li said proudly. If you use it like this, it will cause the might of the sword technique to decrease by about 1%. Though it is not much, it is impossible for it to reach perfection. Nonsense, it should be from bottom to top. Ling Duanyun was naturally unwilling to admit defeat in front of Go Li. The two of them argued back and forth, yet neither of them could gain the upper hand. This was a discussion of sword techniques, and not who was stronger. Even if Go Li was in the severing mundane tier, he could not send Ling Duanyun flying with a single palm strike. Seek understand, then let's use the Cloud Heart Stone to determine, Cheng Sisi said. The Cloud Heart Stone was a special kind of stone. After receiving a powerful blow, it would shrink and fold, and the greater the blow, the more folds there would be. Thus, this could be used to test the might of a technique. They took out 2 Cloud Heart Stones, and Cheng Sisi acted as the examiner to prevent either side from cheating. She first used Ling Duanyun's understanding to unleash the autumn breeze brushing leaves, which blasted onto the Cloud Heart Stone. Instantly, the Cloud Heart Stone folded 11 times, and then used Go Li's understanding to unleash the same move, and the Cloud Heart Stone folded 12 times. Though it was only a gap of 1 layer, Ling Duanyun had indeed lost. Go Li immediately showed an expression of pride, and looked down at Ling Duanyun with a complacent expression. Actually, this was not his understanding, but rather something that he had learned from an elite of his clan. Cheng Sisi couldn't help but look disappointed. She saw Ling Duanyun in a new light, and that was because she felt that Ling Duanyun had his own way of thinking in the field of martial art. He was bold and imaginative, which piqued her interest. But if he was not even as good as Go Li, then there was really something wrong with her judgment. True, it was only a small force in the severing mundane tier, so what kind of talent could they nurture? She suddenly felt a dull feeling and shook her head. I am going to cultivate. Wait, Ling Han spoke up. His descendant had lost, so he naturally could not sit still. You are all wrong. Chapter 2972. Yet Go Li showed an expression of schadenfreude, and smilingly said, not only are Teacher Ma Bang, Teacher Yi Hongqing, and Teacher Shigang all 4th Severance Grand Elders, their teacher is Lord Zhu Mang. He paused for a moment, looked at Ling Han, and said unhurriedly, these 3 are extremely respectful to Lord Zhu. You've tampered with Lord Zhu's sword technique, so they're definitely going to settle the score with you. As they spoke, Ma Bang and the other 2 had already walked over. That's him. Yi Hongqing pointed at Ling Han, his expression extremely unfriendly. Of course, he had a reason to be angry. Previously, he had suddenly received news that someone had tampered with his teacher's sword move, and even caused everyone to gang up on it. In an instant his anger surged. How could he tolerate this? Therefore, he immediately ran over. He didn't expect that Ma Bang and Shigang would also run over as soon as they heard the news. Teachers, this is the person who altered Lord Zhu's sword technique, Go Li hurriedly said. Zhu Bang and the other 2 glared fiercely at Ling Han, as if he was an unforgivable villain. Ling Han smiled faintly and followed his heart. What's wrong with that? Zhu Bang and the other 2 did not immediately make things difficult for him. Instead, they first asked about it and found out that after Ling Han modified the sword style, the power of the original sword style had indeed increased greatly. This made them unable to find any fault with it, and they could not find a place to vent their anger even if they wanted to. Shigang said, since you're so smart, why don't you modify this sword technique, Wild Winds and Waves? It was created by Master when he split his soul, and is hailed by several Immortal Mansion lords as a world-suppressing treasure. When these 3 severing mundane tier Grand Elders arrived, the students that had just dispersed naturally all ran back to watch the commotion. When they heard Shurgang's words, they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Listen, where did this sword technique come from? Even the lords of Immortal Mansion were full of praise, which undoubtedly put a lot of pressure on Ling Han. Forget about whether he could improve it, even if he could, would he dare? Wouldn't that be equivalent to slapping the lords of Immortal Mansion in the face? Ling Han snorted. Not interested. How dare you? Shurgang raised his voice. Then why don't you quickly kneel down and beg for forgiveness from Master? On what basis? Ling Han asked with a smile. Since you are unable to modify Violent Gale Wave, it means that you were deliberately mystifying things, Yi Hongqing said coolly. Kneel! Ma Bang roared. His voice exploded like thunder. If Ling Han really was in the Genesis tier, he would definitely have knelt down upon hearing this shout. This was a deliberate attack from a severing mundane ancestor. But in front of a dignified Empyrean, what did this shout count for? Ling Han was straightforward and didn't intend to target anyone. But when he saw the 3 of them being so aggressive, his anger naturally flared up. He remembered that he had to be low-key, so he had to suppress his anger. But then he thought, if he wanted to break through to the 5th step, shouldn't he let go and do as he pleased? Thinking of this, he grinned. What if I don't kneel? Then do you still want to rebel? Ma Bang stretched out a hand, grabbing at Ling Han. Ling Han casually waved a hand. Xiao, Ma Bang was sent flying, instantly turning into a small black dot that disappeared into the horizon. Everyone was dumbfounded. A severing mundane ancestor was sent flying into the horizon by a Genesis tier with a wave of a hand? Was this a dream? As a teacher, you should set an example. Your duty is to teach others, not to fight viciously, Ling Han said to Shurgang and Yi Hongqing. The 2 of them trembled. They were equal in strength to Ma Bang, and even Ma Bang couldn't stand a single move from Ling Han, so they definitely couldn't either. How is this guy a Genesis tier? He was definitely putting on a show. Go! The 2 of them hurriedly retreated. Seeing that Ling Han had no intention of stopping them, they couldn't help but run even faster. Do you know that you've caused a great disaster? Cheng Sisi looked at Ling Han with a smile. Those 3 are the strongest elites of the branch. If they are no match, they will definitely go to the main division to find stronger people, such as Dividing Soul tier, or even Lord Zhu Mang. Zhu Mang had already nurtured 2 Dividing Soul tier and 17 Severing Mundane tier disciples, and there were even more people who had the status of teacher and student. They were the elders and even clan leaders of the various clans. If these people were alarmed, then that was equivalent to Ling Han going against the entire Anya city. Quick, come and beg me. If I suddenly soften, perhaps I will put in a good word for you. She was quite interested. If she could subdue such a wild and untamed man, it would be a great sense of accomplishment for her. Ling Han smiled slightly. You're just a little girl, what can you do? You dare to look down on me? Cheng Sisi raised an eyebrow, showing a hint of anger. Are you the clan leader of the Chung family, or an elite of the Immortal Palace tier? Ling Han's question caused Cheng Sisi to choke, and then he continued, So, what use would your words be? Cheng Sisi glared at Ling Han angrily. If she really decided to help Ling Han, then she would definitely act coquettishly and ask the clan leader of the Chung family to step out and apologize to Zhu Mang on her behalf. She believed that this matter could still be resolved. But Ling Han actually dared to say such things about her, and she completely lost the mood to plead for Ling Han. Who cares if you die? She humphed and turned her head, appearing incredibly proud. Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. He crossed his legs and quietly watched for any changes. This could be seen as a test for Cheng Sisi, and the test was naturally whether she was worthy of Ling Duanyan. What was the use of having an empty beauty? There was no lack of beautiful women in this world. From the looks of it now, Cheng Sisi's performance completely failed. Not long after, another 7 people arrived. Aside from Shurgang and Yi Hongqing, there were also 2 Severing Mundane tier Grand Elders, and the other 3 were Dividing Soul tier. These 7 people were all disciples of Zhu Mang, and when they found out that someone dared to insult their master, and even sent a junior brother flying, they were naturally all infuriated. "Who are you?" a dividing soul tear asked. "And who are you?" Ling Han countered with a question. The dividing soul tear showed an expression of anger, but he suppressed it and said, "I am Lu Jun." "Oh, I have something to say," Ling Han said very casually. Lu Jun was half dead with anger. "So be it if you didn't admit your name just now, but I have already told you my name now, and you still ignore me? Are you deliberately playing tricks on me?" "Senior brother Lu, I already said that there is no need to be polite with this kind of arrogant person. Just directly capture him," a dividing soul tear beside him said, appearing to be extremely impatient. Lu Jun nodded and said, "All right, capture him first." At first, he had wanted to be polite before resorting to force. After all, Ling Han had sent Flying Horse Bang flying with a single strike, and the strength he had displayed was incredibly astonishing, but Ling Han did not show the slightest bit of kindness, so he felt that there was no need to speak politely with Ling Han. Attack together. The 3 dividing soul tier elites simultaneously attacked Ling Han, wanting to capture him in a single move. End of this chapter. Chapter 2973. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and Xiao, Lu Jun and the others flew into the sky, instantly disappearing without a trace. Everyone spat out their tongues. Those were 3 dividing soul tier elites, and they were actually sent flying with a single wave. It should be known that Ma Bang, who was the first to be sent flying, had yet to return, so where had he been sent flying to? Cheng Cece also looked at Ling Han with an astonished gaze. She had initially thought that Ling Han was only a 5th severance existence, and at most, he would only be a dividing soul tier. Though he could be called an elite in Yi City, he still could not be classified as a top-notch elite. However, now she knew that she had been wrong. This should be an Immortal Palace tier great elite, right? Perhaps only Lord Zhu Mang could suppress him personally. The remaining 4 severing mundane tier elites all scattered in fright. This was a serious matter, so they naturally had to ask Zhu Mang to come. Ling Han smiled faintly and suddenly realized something. He sat down in a cross-legged position. He tried to touch the 4th essential particle of heaven and earth. If he could advance 5 steps in one go, that would really be a joyous matter. Ling Duanyun, Cheng Cece, and the others were all surprised, thinking that Ling Han was really leisurely. After beating them, he actually sat down as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Go Li's expression became more and more unsightly. The stronger this Ling Han was, the more panicked he was, making him constantly worried that something would happen. Very quickly, half a day passed, and more elites arrived. Everyone had heard that a young man had modified Zhu Mang's sword technique, greatly increasing its power, and with a wave, he had sent 3 dividing soul tier elites and a severing mundane tier cultivator flying to who knew where, and they had not returned even now. This kind of intelligence, this kind of strength was really astonishing, causing those Immortal Palace tier elites to be unable to sit still. Furthermore, the matter had become so big, so Zhu Mang definitely could not sit still, and would personally come out. Everyone also wanted to see how much Zhu Mang had improved after so many years. Although everyone respected Zhu Mang, it was precisely because Zhu Mang's status was too high. What if one day his personality suddenly changed, and he had ambitions for power? Then he would become a great enemy. That's Han Lin. It is said that he came with a junior of the Ling family. Call that kid over and ask him about the situation. These experts were extremely interested in Ling Han, and wanted to call Ling Duanyun over to ask about the situation. However, Ling Duanyun did not pay any attention to any of them. In the end, it was still the Cheng family who were smart enough to ask Cheng Cece, and Ling Duanyun spilled out some secrets, but not much. Everyone only knew that Ling Han was indeed related to the Ling family, but no one knew exactly what their relationship was. Ling Duanyun, come here. Someone shouted at Ling Duanyun. When Ling Duanyun saw this, he hurriedly ran over and said respectfully, "Duanyun greets third elder." This was an old man in his 60s, and he put on airs. He nodded slowly and said, Are you an idiot? That person has already attracted a fatal disaster, and you are still with him? Aren't you afraid that the Ling family will be consigned to eternal damnation? Idiot, extremely idiotic. Ling Duanyun hurriedly said, Third Elder, this person has a relatively deep relationship with our Ling family. So what? Now, he has already become the target of public criticism. We have to stay as far away from him as possible. Do you understand? The third elder rebuked. Ling Duanyun shook his head internally, saying that the third elder was short-sighted. However, this was also in line with the third elder's character, because he was a firm believer in changing his surname. He believed that the surname Ling had brought them too much misfortune, and only by abandoning the surname could they have a chance to rise up. Thus, as long as it was related to the Ling family, he naturally could not wait to reject it. How could he be happy that the family could possibly obtain a strong ally? He knew some secrets. Putting aside a mere immortal palace tier, even if a celestial king came, he might not be able to save the Ling family, so he might as well cut all ties with them. Stand here obediently for this old man, the third elder said again. Ling Duanyun nodded. He was not worried about Ling Han in the slightest. After another while, a middle-aged man appeared. He was filled with a scholarly temperament, as if he was a well-read scholar. He did not have the slightest fierceness of a cultivator, yet was an immortal palace tier elite. Greetings, Lord Zhu. Many people clasped their hands in greeting, and some even knelt down, their expressions sincere. This was Zhu Mang, the founder of the Jian and Martial Arts Academy, and one of the strongest elites in Yi City. Perhaps the word one could be removed, because there had long been rumors that he could advance into the ascending origin tier at any time. Zhu Mang nodded at the people around him, and then focused his gaze on Ling Han. Sir, have we met before? He asked. Ling Han opened his eyes and sighed. Although he suddenly had some comprehension, he still could not touch the fourth essential particle. No wonder it was said that going from the fourth step to the fifth step was the most difficult. Even Lin Yu Lian and Xen Chi Hu spent around an epoc's time, and even broke through after obtaining the great medicine from the origin world of the last generation. It was clear how difficult this step was. He glanced at Zhu Mang, and his gaze suddenly sharpened, killing intent rising, but he quickly retracted it. Never met. Then it is impossible for us to have any enmity? Zhu Mang continued to ask. Indeed not. Ling Han shook his head. Then why did you attack and injure my disciple? Zhu Mang suddenly questioned, his expression righteous and awe-inspiring. If it was anyone else, they might be overwhelmed by his aura. That's right, there was no enmity, so why did you send his disciple flying? If he was suppressed in aura, his battle prowess would definitely be affected. Ling Han smiled slightly. I have no enmity with you, but your master is a great enemy that will not rest until one of us is dead. When these words were spoken, it instantly caused an uproar. Master? What did he mean? Wasn't Zhu Mang a lone cultivator, so what master? Zhu Mang was originally calm and collected, but when he heard these words, his expression changed, and his heart beat like a drum. He forced himself to calm down. Nonsense. Is that so? Ling Han shook his head. Then I'll force you to show your true form. He waved his hand lightly and struck out at Zhu Mang. Zhu Mang hurriedly counterattacked. The two of them exchanged a blow, but it was a draw. Ling Han smiled calmly and struck out again. This time, his power was much greater, surpassing the level of immortal palace tier. What? Sensing the terror of Ling Han's strike, those great elites of the immortal palace tier all exclaimed in shock, their eyes widening. This was actually an ascending origin tier big shot. Ascending origin tier. Heavens, and Yi City actually produced an ascending origin tier great elite. Hearing the exclamations of these immortal palace tier elites, Cheng Sisi couldn't help but widen her beautiful eyes. She had always been a proud little princess, thinking that no one was worthy of her, but now compared to Ling Duanyun, it was as if she was the ugly duckling. However, what was even more shocking was Zhu Mang. He also shot out a strike, and blocked Ling Han's palm strike again. Chapter 2974. Zhu Mang was actually also in the ascending origin tier. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Though everyone was guessing when Zhu Mang might advance into the ascending origin tier, this was only a guess, after all. Who knew how long it would take before it would be realized? But now, Zhu Mang actually exploded with the power of the ascending origin tier. How could that be? Against immortal palace tier cultivators at the ascending origin tier, this was an absolute suppression. Even if they were attacked by a group of immortal palace tier cultivators, they would need at least 100 immortal palace tier cultivators to be a match for them. The problem was, there were less than 100 immortal palace tier elites in an Yi city, so why was Zhu Mang so low-key? Boom! The shockwave transformed into ripples that surged out in all directions, causing everyone's figures to sway. This was the aftermath of a clash between ascending origin tiers, so it still possessed extremely destructive power. Just who are you? Zhu Mang asked sternly. Ling Han smiled faintly. I should be the one asking you that. Zhu Mang did not speak, only staring at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head and raised his palm again, slapping towards Zhu Mang. Hong, boundless radiance circulated within Zhu Mang's body, transforming into rays of celestial light. He roared loudly, and 3 rays of brilliant light appeared on his body. A terrifying might swept out, and everyone felt an intense reverence from the depths of their hearts, involuntarily kneeling down. Immortal King, they muttered, their expressions stupefied. Who would have thought that Zhu Mang was actually a celestial king, and a powerful existence at the third heaven? Peng, forcefully taking on this blow, Zhu Mang's surging aura instantly seemed to have suffered a direct blow, and instantly became dispirited. Pooh! He spat out a mouthful of blood. What? Everyone hugged their heads and cried out in alarm. They had yet to recover from the shock that Zhu Mang was an immortal king when they saw the scene of him being blasted so badly. Hiss, that was a third-stage immortal king. Then just how ferocious was Ling Han? Cheng Sisi even looked at Ling Duanyun, her eyes extremely bright, as if she had discovered a peerless treasure. Coincidentally, Ling Duanyun also looked over, but his heart skipped a beat. There was actually an indescribable complexity in his heart, and it was not happiness or joy. You've actually forced me to this extent. That Zhu Mang howled. Boundless black qi surged within his body, causing his aura to rise once more. Hong Long Long, heaven and earth trembled. Thunder clouds surged and lightning blazed, but it didn't descend. Can't hold back any longer? Ling Han said indifferently. He clasped his hands behind his back, allowing Zhu Mang's aura to rise. Die! Zhu Mang charged over, bringing with him a black aura. His previous elegant appearance had completely changed, and he seemed to have turned into an evil god. Ling Han stretched out his right hand and pressed down. It seemed to be a casual action, but it was like the suppression of the heavens. Pa! Zhu Mang fell to the ground, his 4 limbs spread out in the shape of the Chinese character, appearing to have no power to resist at all. This was an absolute suppression. Everyone was speechless. The strength that Zhu Mang displayed was getting stronger and stronger. Now, it had even surpassed the third heaven of the Celestial King realm. However, in front of Ling Han, it was completely useless. What is your goal here? Ling Han asked. Zhu Mang lay on the ground, his gaze hatefully staring at Ling Han. So what if you've defeated me? You are destined to die. Ha! He laughed wildly, appearing to be extremely insane. It's fine if you don't want to say. It's very easy to guess, Ling Han said calmly. I'm just here to help Hua brainwash others and bring calamity to the common people. He had discovered at first glance that Zhu Mang's body had an aura unique to Hua. There was no way that a Celestial King realm cultivator could hide from him. Zhu Mang's expression involuntarily changed drastically. He stared at Ling Han. Who are you? Who exactly are you? The one who will ultimately bury Hua. Ling Han moved. Pa! A single palm strike killed Zhu Mang. Boom! Heaven and earth mourned. A celestial king had fallen, and even the heavens were moved. However, there was an indescribable joy in everyone's heart. It was incomparably strange. This was because Zhu Mang was not only an celestial king, but he also had some traits of Huaxiang. That was why the reaction of heaven and earth was so strange. Ling Han looked at the sky. It seemed that even though Huaxiang was digesting Fire Frost Plain, he did not stop. He was still very active and kept making sneak attacks. Even though Zhu Mang could not withstand a single blow from him, he was an celestial king after all. Imperceptibly, he could influence countless people. For example, in an Yi city, who knew how many people worshipped Zhu Mang and viewed him as their idol. At that time, if Zhu Mang made a rallying cry, it was very likely that the people who did not know the truth would be moved. This was just in Yi city. How many in Yi cities were there in the entire Xian Mo plain? Ling Han took a deep breath. He had not expected that a whim on a whim would allow him to dig out a seed of Huaxiang. He felt a strong sense of urgency. It was clear that Huaxiang was speeding up his invasion. There were no more high-level planes in the origin world. If Xian Mo plain fell, then Huaxiang's invasion would be unstoppable, and the entire origin world would fall. 7 steps, he needed the strength of 7 steps. Ling Han sighed in his heart. He felt that he should let go of everything to be able to communicate with the 4th type of essence particle as soon as possible. But the current situation was so dangerous. How could he relax? It seemed that he had to place his hopes on the core of the Fire Frost Plain. This was very likely to allow him to advance from 6 steps to 7 steps. If he obtained it, it should not be difficult for him to advance to 5 steps. Senior. Lord. Everyone knelt on the ground. They all looked at Ling Han with reverence. This man killed a celestial king with a raise of his hand. He was unbelievably strong. Ling Han stretched out his hand and pressed down, erasing everyone's short-term memories. He still did not want to expose his identity. Let's go. He left with Ling Duanyun. He decided to nurture Ling Duanyun in a short period of time so that he could at least establish himself in an Yi city. Then, he would leave to plan and obtain the core of the Fire Frost Plain. The mission of searching for other members of the Ling family would be handed over to Ling Duanyun. He could not do everything himself. Ling Duanyun began a hellish cultivation. After 300 years, who knew how many layers of skin he shed, but his strength had really been tempered. He advanced into the immortal palace tier, and his foundation was incredibly sturdy. Ling Han left. He first wanted to see Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and the others, and understand what had happened to the Ling family in these years. Ordinary people naturally could not know the residents of a heavenly venerable 6th step. Ling Han also spent a lot of effort to finally find out where Zhou Heng was. Knowing one was enough. Ling Han did not let the Empress and Hu Niu go with him. He went to the Zhou clan alone. If he encountered any situation, it would be very easy for him to leave. The current misfortune of the Ling family made him feel a sliver of wariness, though he was more willing to believe in Zhou Heng's character. He did not hide his tracks. When he arrived at the Zhou clan, he spread out his aura and sent out a notice. Chapter 2976. After so many years of devouring, the core of the fiery frost plain was finally going to be exposed. This would trigger a great fight. For the origin world, no matter whose hands this core landed in, it was fine as long as it wasn't madness. But who didn't want this treasure? No matter who, as long as they were celestial venerables, they would be able to advance greatly in cultivation, and even advancing from 6 to 7 steps was not impossible. In order to fight for this core, it could be imagined that there would definitely be a bloodbath. However, if they wanted to join the fight, they would have to enter the Frostfire dimension. And the Frostfire dimension was already occupied by madness. This meant that if they entered madness's territory, almost everyone's strength would drop by a large margin. And they would have to face madness and its army. How dangerous would that be? Even a 6th step celestial venerable would be easily smashed into pieces. Thankfully, there were still 7th-step celestial venerables who would act this time. They were undying and indestructible, so they naturally didn't fear madness's strength. Ling Han stood up. He was finally going to welcome a turning point. Ancestor, you're going to act? Ling Duanyun asked. He knew that Ling Han was going to fight for the plain core. Ling Han nodded. Hurry up and find the descendants of the Ling family. Yes, Ling Duanyun said respectfully. Under Ling Han's careful guidance, he was now a ninth heaven celestial king, but advancing into celestial venerable was still a long way off. Among Ling Han's descendants, he could indeed be considered outstanding, but how could celestial venerable be so easy to achieve? Besides, he also let go of Qing Sisi and focused on martial art because he slowly discovered that Qing Sisi wasn't a good match for him. Ling Han bid farewell to the Empress and Hunyou. This time, he was going to enter Madness's territory, and bringing the two girls was too dangerous. Even a celestial venerable tool was completely unreliable in front of Madness's power, and added with the fact that Chong Yen and the others would also act against Ling Han, it would be even more difficult. This time, he would be snatching food from the tiger's mouth. He believed that Chong Yen and the others would definitely plot for Feng Wuding, so he would have to face 5 7-step celestial venerables directly. Although Ling Han had deduced all the 7th-rate heavenly venerate symbols and raised his strength to a terrifying 2,000 times, he still couldn't compete with a 7th-step heavenly venerate. He shook his head. Perhaps he would be able to withstand one move, or perhaps he wouldn't even be able to withstand one. However, this was a rare opportunity for him. Whether or not he could break through to the 5th step quickly depended on whether or not he could obtain the plane core. He set off and broke into the void. After rushing for a while, he tore open space and entered the flame frost plane. With the resonance of the plane's power, it was naturally a piece of cake for him to enter the flaming frost plane. However, the flaming frost plane had completely changed. It was just like the plane group of the previous Yuan world. There were ruins everywhere, and there were bottomless sinkholes on the ground. It was the same in the sky. Stars turned into waterfalls, and the scene was shocking. After arriving at this place, Ling Han had to be extremely careful, because there was one of the most powerful beings in the world here. Frenzy, if he really went up against Frenzy's main body, he would definitely be turned into ashes in an instant. Even if he had the combat power of a 6th-step heavenly venerate, it was still not enough. He could fight against a 7th-step heavenly venerate, not because a 7th-step heavenly venerate's power was comparable to Frenzy's, but because his physique was immortal, he could only suppress it and not kill it. Ling Han restrained all his aura and changed his appearance. Unless he had no other choice, he didn't want to make a move or escape into the void. Time passed quietly. He just sat on a large rock and sensed the changes in this plane. This plane was going to die. A faint sorrow rose from the bottom of Ling Han's heart. There was an intrinsic power of the fiery frost plane inside his body, and now it had already evolved into a middle-grade plane. It could be said that he could very clearly sense that kind of sorrow between heaven and earth. No one was willing to die, and the world was no exception. However, there was no other way. Frenzy's devouring had already brought its life to an end. When the plane core was exposed and refined, that would be the moment when the flame frost plane completely disappeared. Although Ling Han had come to fight for the plane core, he also felt sympathy for the flaming frost plane. Once, this was the only super high-level plane, but now it had fallen to the point where it was about to completely disappear. It made one sigh. "I can promise you that you will try your best to obtain the plane core," Ling Han said. Rumble. This plane continued to collapse. It had originally been boundlessly large, but now more than 99% of the area had disappeared, devoured by the madness. And the plane's core, which had always been hidden, had nowhere to hide, and was forced to be exposed. Because the area was constantly shrinking, Ling Han had to change places frequently and head towards the central area. About half a year later, the flaming frost plane was only the size of a city. To ordinary people, this was still unbelievably large, but to a celestial venerable, it was pitifully small. Sweeping his gaze across, he saw everything. Ling Han saw many old friends, such as Lin Yu Lian, Xen Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and Feng Wuding. In addition, there were many 6th-step and 5th-step celestial venerables, and even many 3rd-step and 4th-step celestial venerables. Clearly, the temptation of the plane core was too great. Even though this place was incomparably dangerous, it still made these powerhouses, who stood at the peak of the world, rush like ducks. However, the 7th-step celestial venerables had not appeared. They were probably secretly fighting with Frenzy. Otherwise, Frenzy would not allow these people to stand here peacefully. As this area shrank day by day, everyone knew that the final battle was about to erupt. One, a terrifying aura descended. They saw a tall man standing upright, exuding a great aura that could suppress the heavens. Celestial Venerable Sundermount. His gaze swept across them, pausing on every single one of them for a moment before moving away again. However, when his gaze swept over Ling Han, he paused for a long time, revealing a thoughtful expression. He pointed at Ling Han. I have to say, you are really bold. You actually dare to appear here. He recognized him. Ling Han shook his head inwardly. Even the seventh step Celestial Venerables could not see through his disguise. However, the seventh step Celestial Venerables was still the seventh step Celestial Venerables, so it was easy for them to see through his disguise. Besides him, how many people would need to disguise themselves? Since his disguise had been seen through, Ling Han was also very straightforward. He directly revealed his true appearance and said, "Why wouldn't I dare to appear? It's not like your family owns this place. Why are you so nosy?" Seeing Ling Han's true appearance, exclamations instantly rang out in the surroundings. He was really too famous now. He had killed 7 sixth step Celestial Venerables in a row. How many people could do this? Other than a few 7th step Celestial Venerables, no one else could do this. Ling Han. Feng Wuding roared angrily and took the lead to charge over. He directly attacked and blasted at Ling Han. After so many years, his cultivation had also made great progress. He had reached the peak of the 4th step, but he had not broken through to the 5th step. Without the red great medicine, it should be impossible for him to break through in such a short time. He hated Ling Han to the core. He must defeat Ling Han with his own hands to prove that he was the son of destiny. Chapter 2977. A Beautiful Romance. Feng Wuding charged over. After so many years of accumulation, Feng Wuding had become even more terrifying. He had already transformed the power of the 100 planes within his body into true planes, and he had strengthened them to their current limits. He went all out, and 10 runes glowed as he attacked, exuding boundless pressure. 10 first-class runes, and they were a combination at that, increased his battle prowess by almost 600 times. The 100 planes were all extremely close to the level of high-level planes, and they exuded a terrifying might that could suppress the heavens. With such an ultimate move, perhaps 99% of 6th-step Heavenly Venerables could only retreat, not daring to face it head-on. The current Feng Wuding was brimming with confidence. He believed that he could definitely suppress Ling Han and obtain the first victory in this series of battles between the two of them. Meanwhile, Heavenly Venerable Sundermount didn't attack again. The 5 7th-step Heavenly Venerables seemed to have a special kind of love for Feng Wuding. Thus, even though he wanted to kill Ling Han very much, he was willing to grant Feng Wuding his wish. He wanted to use Ling Han's defeat to establish Feng Wuding's reputation as the #1 prodigy. Boom! With boundless killing intent and boundless might, Feng Wuding had already arrived. The entire world was in an uproar. The battle prowess of a peak 6th-step Heavenly Venerate was indescribably strong. Even absolute prodigies like Lin Yolian, Xen Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and White Rice were dazzled. This was really too strong. Feng Wuding's primordial power was already infinitely close to peak 6th-step Heavenly Venerate, and with the 10 first-class runes and the suppression of 100 planes, how could he block this? Perhaps even if the 4 of them joined forces, they would only barely be able to put up a fight. They definitely couldn't take this head-on. They had to exhaust Feng Wuding until his runes ran out. Only then could they truly resist. As expected of the son of destiny chosen by the previous origin world. He was too terrifying. How could Ling Han block this? Everyone turned to look at Ling Han, their expressions complicated. On one hand, they hoped that Ling Han could win. After all, Ling Han represented this generation's origin world. On the other hand, Ling Han seemed to be Frenzy's subordinate, so they definitely shouldn't hope for him to win. Ling Han smiled faintly and shook his head. Did he still have any opponents at the 6th-step Heavenly Venerate? What a joke! He raised his fist and punched at Feng Wuding calmly and without a trace of anger. Bam! Feng Wuding's attack was immediately stopped, and he was sent flying back. Cracks immediately appeared on the 100 planes he had released, and they almost collapsed. What? Everyone's eyes widened, unable to believe what they were seeing. The battle between the two strongest six-step cultivators, the battle between two generations of the Yuan world's chosen ones, actually ended just like that. However, even if he didn't want to believe it, he had no choice but to believe it. Feng Wuding rolled on the ground like a rolling gourd, and he only came to a stop after rolling for several hundred meters. Even though he managed to get up with great difficulty, his entire body was covered in blood, and his flesh was lacerated. It was an extremely miserable sight. Looking at Ling Han's incredibly relaxed and skillful manner, it seemed as if he only needed to think about it, and with just a little more force, he would be able to blast Feng Wuding into pieces. There is no suspense. Hiss. Feng Wuding found this the hardest to accept. He had already adjusted himself to his peak condition, and he believed that he was the strongest person below level 7. However, only when he truly faced off against Ling Han did he realize that a level 6 cultivator could be this ferocious. He was filled with resentment. The heavens had already given birth to him, Feng Wuding. Why did they have to give birth to another Ling Han? Wuding, there is no need to be discouraged. Empyrean Sunderpeak calmly said, "This unfilial son is Frenzy's subordinate. It is not surprising that he is proficient in some strange techniques. As long as you cultivate properly, once you reach level 7, you will be able to suppress even Frenzy. Why would you need to take today's small loss to heart? This Empyrean shall help you erase this heart demon." He made his move. Boom. His right hand reached out, and boundless essence energy condensed into a massive hand that slammed toward Ling Han. Even though Ling Han was the strongest 6th-step cultivator, his expression would change when facing this attack from a 7th-step cultivator. Could he block it? Ling Han did not know. If he used all his 7-stream talismans and released all his planes, perhaps he would be able to block the attack for a while, but the price to pay was too high. If a plane collapsed, it would be fine if he spent some time to repair it, but if some were completely destroyed, then they would disappear forever. He couldn't take it head-on. Ling Han was about to tear open the void and leave, but another hand reached out and forcefully pressed down on Empyrean Sunderpeak's hand. "Lin Luo, it's you again," Empyrean Sunderpeak said coldly. "You actually dare to protect Frenzy's subordinate? Are you trying to betray us?" "Hee, everyone knows what kind of person I am. Why would I be afraid of you slandering me?" Lin Luo's voice rang out, but his true body did not appear. "Don't forget, our mission is to delay Frenzy. Whoever obtains the plane core will depend on their own luck. You have already crossed the boundary." Empyrean Sunderpeak's expression was ugly. Their previous agreement was indeed as Lin Luo had said. The 7th-step cultivator would delay Frenzy and create opportunities for the others. But the problem was that he had previously thought that Feng Wuding was invincible under level 7. Naturally, that didn't matter. The plane core was definitely Feng Wuding's. But now, Feng Wuding was actually not a match for a single punch from Ling Han. How could he leave then? If Ling Han obtained the plane core and used it to advance to level 5, then he would have combat strength at level 7. He had to kill him. He sent out a signal to contact Empyrean Chong Yen and the others, asking them to block Lin Luo. 7 steps of undying and indestructible, but could be blocked and even suppressed. Today, this unfilial child must die, Empyrean Sunderpeak said as he attacked again. Lin Luo's hand still stretched out, but he had just reached out when he heard a booming voice. "Fellow Taoist Lin, you should just watch from the side." Hong, a third hand reached out, causing the heavens to tremble. It was Empyrean Chong Yen. Lin Luo's hand had been blocked. Anyone who could reach level 7 was an emperor among geniuses, a genius among hegemons. Who was weaker than the other? Sunderpeak's hand continued to slap towards Ling Han, but at this moment, a 4th person attacked. Pung, a fist landed on Sunderpeak's hand, shattering it. To be able to shatter an attack from level 7, it had to be someone at level 7. Who was it? Bai Fan's figure appeared. Sunderpeak, Chongyen, you have crossed the boundary. Crossed the boundary? Empyrean Sunderpeak sneered. We are just killing a traitor, so how is this crossing the boundary? Instead, you are the ones being too emotional. If this kid grows any further, it will be too late for regrets. There's no need to waste words with him. A cold voice rang out. It was Empyrean Big Dipper. His figure appeared, followed by Empyrean Black Feather and Empyrean Half Moon. The previous Origin World's 7 steps had all been used. Lin Luo couldn't help but be furious. You guys really don't know how to look at the big picture. You actually came all at once. There are only Brother Xin and the other two. How can you block Frenzy? No matter. Killing this kid will only take an instant. It won't be too late for us to return, Empyrean Big Dipper said indifferently. Reading on a phone is more refreshing. Chapter 2978. A Beautiful Romance. Heavenly Venerable Sundermount sneered, and attacked again. Now that all 7 steps of the previous generation's Origin World had been used, how could Lin Luo and Bai Fan stop them? Ling Han was doomed. Lin Luo attacked, but was blocked by Heavenly Venerable Chongyen. Bai Fan attacked, but was blocked by Heavenly Venerable Big Dipper. Was there anyone else? Wang, a figure appeared, and punched at Heavenly Venerable Sundermount's giant hand. Pung! The giant hand immediately crumbled. Here came another 7 steps. Yes, that was Xin Fu. Ling Han could not help but be surprised that Xin Fu would help him. Previously in the extraterritorial battlefield, didn't Xin Fu insist that he was a traitor? Moreover, he and Xin Chihu were old rivals. Thus, the 7 steps that were least likely to help him was Xin Fu. But the reality was that Xin Fu really had to act at this critical moment. Xin Fu! Heavenly Venerable Sundermount gritted his teeth. He could not understand this person. He had clearly shown enmity towards Ling Han, but he had repeatedly hindered them. His actions were incomprehensible. Xin Fu smiled faintly. An instant has passed. Shouldn't you all return? Humph, if I don't kill this kid, I am not human. Heavenly Venerable Sundermount said resolutely. His avatar had been destroyed by Ling Han. This was a great humiliation. He attacked, no longer with a palm strike. Instead, he attacked directly at Ling Han. Chongyen looked at Lin Luo, Big Dipper looked at Bai Fan, and Han Banuel looked at Xin Fu. Who else could save Ling Han? Let me experience it. Laughter rang out, and a slender figure appeared, facing off against Heavenly Venerable Sundermount. Boom, the two of them each attacked, creating a terrifying energy storm. That person was instantly sent flying, but Heavenly Venerable Sundermount was also blocked. Who was this newcomer? Everyone looked over, and then they revealed expressions of shock. Zhou Heng, it was actually Zhou Heng. After a moment of shock, everyone revealed expressions of shock and wild joy. Zhou Heng could block this attack. What did this mean? He had already advanced 7 steps. Otherwise, even the strongest 6 steps would not be able to block 7 steps. It was clear that Zhou Heng had just taken 7 steps, so he was at a disadvantage. However, he was immortal after taking 7 steps. So what if he was at a disadvantage? Although everyone had expected that it would only be a matter of time before Zhou Heng took 7 steps, they were still shocked to see Zhou Heng take 7 steps. However, the primordial world had another 7-step expert, which was naturally a joyous matter. So what if you've advanced 7 steps? This supreme being can suppress you with a single hand. Empyrean Sundermount coldly spoke. This was the truth. Even though he was at 7 steps undying, there was still a disparity in strength. What if I'm included? Chu Hao's voice could be heard leisurely. He strolled over. His body was blazing with flames as if it could never be extinguished. You've also taken 7 steps? Empyrean Sundermount's expression finally changed. He hadn't expected that in just a few tens of billions of years, there would actually be 2 people who had silently taken 7 steps. Senior brother Zhou and I can only be considered as newcomers in front of fellow Taoist Sundermount. So, I'll shamelessly join hands and ask for fellow Taoist Sundermount's guidance, Chu Hao said with a smile. Empyrean Sundermount's expression was grave. If there was only Zhou Heng or Chu Hao, he was confident that he could easily suppress them. The problem was that there were two of them. Even though these two were newcomers to the 7th step and their battle prowess hadn't reached the pinnacle, 7 steps was still 7 steps. How could he treat them lightly? And he still wanted to kill Ling Han? Difficult, difficult, difficult. Fuck, he only wanted to kill a mere 4th step expert. Why was it so difficult? Empyrean Sundermount didn't make another move. Currently, they only had a slight advantage on the battlefield. Moreover, Wu Jihong and Empyrean Blood Rainbow could appear at any time. At that time, they would be the ones at a disadvantage, so there was no point in making another move. Shwa, right at this moment, an enormous black object whipped over, bringing with it an indescribably terrifying aura. Frenzy. Now, there were only 2 7-step experts fighting against Frenzy. How could they resist the world's #1 expert? Frenzy's goal with this attack was very clear. He wanted to kill everyone here. This was absolutely not the ravings of a fool. Frenzy was too strong. If there was another level above the 7th step, then Frenzy would be at the 8th step. However, the 7th step was undying and indestructible. Only then could they rely on their advantage in numbers to forcibly resist Frenzy. The rest were mediocre. Who could oppose him? Lin Luo and the other 7-step experts all gave a light shout and attacked that large tentacle. In the collision of their attacks, a terrifying energy storm was instantly formed. Even the 6th-step experts didn't want to come into contact with it. They all fled in all directions. However, Frenzy's attack was blocked. Ling Han witnessed this with his own eyes, and he was shocked. He more or less knew how strong a 7-step expert was. However, as many as 10 7-step experts had attacked, and they had only barely blocked one attack from Frenzy. This Frenzy was really too strong. It was no wonder that the Allied forces could only retreat in defeat. Hong hong hong. An intense battle unfolded. Frenzy didn't have any scruples, and he unleashed his full battle prowess. In front of such an expert, even Ling Han was useless. He could only hide, and retreat far away from the center of the battle. Wu Jihong and Empyrean Blood Rainbow also rushed over. 12 7-step experts joined forces to fight Frenzy. Under such a wild and chaotic bombardment, the last remaining heaven and earth of the Flames Now plane was quickly smashed into pieces. A grand light surged, illuminating this cold and gloomy world. Plane core, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then they reacted. Before this, the core of a super high-level plane couldn't be approached at all, because it could mobilize the energy of the entire world. It was too terrifying. Even a 7-step undying expert had a limit to their power, and they would be forcibly blocked outside. But now, the Flames Now plane was almost gone. So what if it was a plane core? Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. It couldn't mobilize the energy of the world, and could only become nourishment for martial artists to strengthen themselves. Of course, no matter how weak this plane core was, it wasn't something anyone could touch. No matter what, one had to be an Empyrean. Otherwise, if they touched it, they would be shocked to death by the violent energy. Everyone naturally knew that the purpose of coming here was for the plane core. Now that the treasure had appeared, there was no need to be polite. The scramble began. No matter who it was, they all attacked with all their might, wanting to grab the plane core and run. But the energy storm here was surging, forming a natural barrier. The scene was a mess, and no one could succeed. They could only see that the ball of light jumping in the sky, and it didn't fall into anyone's hands. Ling Han was naturally fighting with all his might. Originally, he shouldn't have any opponents, but Chong Yen, Po Yu, and the other 2 people were actually targeting him. They would attack him from time to time. Although it was just a casual attack, how could Ling Han take it lightly? The scene was strangely chaotic, but at this moment, a black shadow appeared. Peng, peng, peng. Wherever it passed, everyone was instantly shattered into pieces. Even the 6th-step powerhouses were no exception. She rushed toward the plane core, and no one could stop her. Chapter 2980. Ling Han first found the Empress and Hu Niu, and then he would start seclusion. He wouldn't come out until he reached 5 steps, so he naturally had to let the Empress and Hu Niu know. Then he started seclusion. He took out the plain core and pressed his hand on it. Immediately, a mystical power flowed into him. Peng, peng, peng. There was a huge tremor, and the world he saw became different. The scenery around him dimmed, and there were only countless stars in the sky. Essential particles. However, Ling Han already possessed 3 types of essential particles, and they rejected the other essential particles to the extreme. Thus, only 3 types of essential particles were incredibly clear, and the other 3 types of essential particles were very blurry, unable to be seen clearly or touched. From 4 steps to 5 steps, this was incredibly difficult in the first place. Even for Ling Han, the greatest prodigy of all time, it was the same. He patiently used the plain core to resonate and made the other 3 kinds of particles become clear. This speed of advancement was ridiculously slow, but it couldn't be helped. After all, what Ling Han had obtained was only a fragment of the plain core. Though it was already considered big, it was not complete after all. Ling Han was full of confidence in himself. He only needed a guide. He let go of his desire for victory and defeat, and calmed himself. This was thanks to the ordinary life in the recent hundreds of millions of years, which allowed Ling Han to calm down. Time slowly passed. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, yet Ling Han forgot everything, merging with the plain core and resonating with heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, 900 million years had flown by. The fragment of the plain core in Ling Han's hand could no longer generate light. It was only a fragment in the first place, and now that its energy was exhausted, it had become a useless rock. But Ling Han was still in a deep level of comprehension. This fragment of the plain core had already played its intended role, and now Ling Han could only rely on himself. Advancing a step into the heavenly venerable tier could be said to be very difficult, because even after several epochs, one might not be able to take a step, but it could also be said to be easy, because as long as he sensed one more kind of essential particle, he would be able to take this crucial step. In Ling Han's sea of consciousness, the 3 essential particles had become much clearer from their incomparably blurry state. However, they still hadn't fully evolved. Ling Han really wanted to grasp all 3 types of intrinsic particles in one go, but this was not realistic. If he really did that, he would only gain nothing. Therefore, he chose one of them and began to comprehend it on a deeper level. Time passed quickly again, and the particles in his sea of consciousness became clearer and clearer, to the point where they were within his reach. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes. When, around his body, energy was boiling, turning into substance. He moved his hands, and immediately, a mysterious power entered his body. Boom! Ling Han's body underwent an earth-shattering transformation. Even though it was just a trace, it brought about a qualitative change, because this was the 4th type of intrinsic power. Ling Han did not end his seclusion immediately, because being able to sense the 4th essential particle was just a crucial step. However, there was no qualitative change in his strength. He was patient, and continued to draw out Na-Zi to temper his body. As his cultivation level opened up, the upper limit of his power was also opened up, and he could accommodate even more power. The total number of dimensions also suddenly reached the level of over 10,000. He could now raise every dimension in his body to a high level, but the time needed was almost limitless. Perhaps, after several hundred epochs, these dimensions would only reach their limit. And this was only a high-level dimension. What about the super high level? Perhaps they would never reach it. 700 million years passed, and Ling Han finally stopped. He stood up, showing endless confidence. Battle prowess of level 7, invincible in the world. It was time to save his son and daughter. When Ling Han came out of seclusion, the Empress and Hu Niu immediately came over, both filled with surprise. Ling Han, you've succeeded? Hu Niu asked. Ling Han nodded and said, I'll go fetch Jin Shui and Shi now. You two wait for me here. The 2 girls nodded. Even Hu Niu was not willful. They knew that though Ling Han now possessed battle prowess of level 7, he did not have the physique of level 7, and would still be at a disadvantage against Chong Yen, Heavenly Venerable Piyu, and the others. Thus, they definitely could not cause trouble for Ling Han. Ling Han set out, heading towards West Cloud Sky. It was very far, but for a level 7, as long as it was in this dimension, it would only be a matter of a few steps no matter how far it was. In less than 2 hours, Ling Han had already arrived in this region. Then, it was the 100 Frost Valley. This place was covered in thick frost. Strangely, there was white, black, and even red. Looking from afar in the sky, it was like a brocade, incredibly colorful. The 100 Frost Valley was still very big. Ling Han released his divine sense to search, but he was very careful, controlling his divine sense to search slowly. There was definitely a level 7 keeping watch here, and it was best not to alarm them if possible. This time, his priority was to rescue people. After rescuing them, he would go to the previous origin world and dig out more great medicines so that he could advance to level 6 as soon as possible. At that time, he would be able to suppress level 7. Found it. Very soon, Ling Han locked onto several auras that were connected to him by bloodline. He moved quietly, and after a few breaths, he arrived in a deep valley. There were several dozen people sitting cross-legged there. Ling Jianshui, Ling Shi, Fu Tianxing, the Rain Emperor, the original born Heavenly Venerable, the large black dog, and so on were his descendants, disciples, brothers, and friends. Although they were trapped here, these people obviously did not give up on themselves, and did not stop cultivating in the slightest. For example, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing had even caught up and advanced 4 steps, while Ling Jianshui had advanced 3 steps, and Ling Fifan had advanced 2 steps. It was very shocking that so many Heavenly Venerables could walk out of this door. The Rain Emperor and the original born Heavenly Venerable were still at 3 steps, and the large black dog was also unable to advance 2 steps. It seemed that 1 step was his limit. Then, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing suddenly opened their eyes. This was because Ling Han, in his excitement, slightly released some of his own aura. What is it? Ling Jianshui asked. His cultivation level was slightly weaker, so he could not detect it. Someone is spying on us, Ling Shi said with her divine sense. Ling Jianshui's eyes twitched and he humphed. They were already lower disciples, so who was still spying on them? Stop hiding, come out. Ling Fifan shouted sternly. Ling Han sighed. At first, he had wanted to come and leave quietly, but now, with Ling Fifan's shout, it was likely that the old monster overseeing this place would be alarmed. He walked out and said with a smile, "Will you die if you keep your voice down?" Ling Fifan was startled, and then a pleasantly surprised expression appeared on his face. "Old man, it's actually you. What? Don't you welcome me?" Ling Han glared at him and said, "Then I'll leave." "Father!" Ling Jianshui and Ling Shi both called out, similarly pleasantly surprised. "Fourth brother. Little Han." They knew that since Ling Han had come, he had definitely come to save them, and he definitely had great confidence. "Greetings, Master." Fu Tianxing hurriedly knelt down. Ling Han raised his hand and said, "We can catch up slowly. Now, let's leave this place first." "Humph, since you've come, you still want to leave?" A cold voice rang out, and Heavenly Venerable Sunder Mountain appeared. A female university student colluded with a gangster big brother to play badger games in a small inn for money. In the end, the big brother was knocked unconscious, and his clothes were stripped off. For more information, please search for the book written by Hua City's X-ray Vision Immortal Doctor, My Good Brother. The full text is free. Everyone, please help to download and read it. Chapter 2981. Empyrean Sundermount appeared and stared coldly at Ling Han. His eyes were filled with chilling intent. With 7 steps, there was nothing he couldn't do. However, Ling Han had managed to escape from him time and time again, and had even destroyed one of his clones. To him, this was a great humiliation that he had never experienced before. Moreover, Ling Han could threaten Feng Wuding's position as the Son of Destiny, which made him want to eliminate Ling Han even more. After plotting for so many years, this evil brat had finally fallen into the pit. Ling Han smiled. Smelly old man, long time no see. You're still as annoying as ever. Isn't that so? Their family is reuniting after so many years. What are you doing here to spoil the fun? I'll kill them one by one right in front of you. Let's see if you can still smile then, said Empyrean Sundermount coldly. Although he was talking about the lives of several Empyreans, his face was completely expressionless. It was as if they were just some random cats or dogs. Ling Han's expression involuntarily turned cold and he said darkly, "Old dog, do you think you're not dying fast enough?" Empyrean Sundermount snorted, no longer speaking nonsense with Ling Han. Could it be that he, a seventh-step cultivator, was going to bicker with someone else? He made a move, but it was not aimed at Ling Han. Instead, it was aimed at Ling Shi. Since he had said that he would kill the others in front of Ling Han, the words of 7 steps were not a joke. Scram! Ling Han roared and punched out at Mountain Breaker. Boom! Amidst the intense fluctuations, Empyrean Sundermount's attack was neutralized by Ling Han. However, it wasn't a complete match, as the attack had only been deflected and not completely dissipated. It couldn't be helped. Ling Han's battle prowess had only just advanced to the 7th step. Just like Zhou Heng and Chu Hao, who had just broken through, their strength was definitely no match for veteran 7th step experts like Po Yu. Moreover, Ling Han had an even greater disadvantage. His physique had yet to reach the level of immortality. "You guys leave first," Ling Han said. He was weaker than Po Yu in terms of strength, and he did not have any trump cards that could prevent him from dying. If this battle dragged on, he would definitely lose. The purpose of this operation was to rescue them. Since they had already succeeded, why bother? Po Yu would definitely kill him, but not now. Ling Shi and the others all nodded. They knew that they wouldn't be of much help even if they stayed and would only drag Ling Han down, so they left one after another. Little Han, beat this old bastard to death. The large black dog didn't forget to make things difficult for celestial venerable Po Yu. Sure enough, heavenly venerate Sundermount's face darkened when he heard this. He had never imagined that this black dog, who had been so well behaved all this time, would actually reveal its incomparably lowly nature when it left the group. If he had known earlier, he would have killed him with a single slap. "Today, no one will be able to escape," he said coldly. The power of 7 steps was released. He was about to unleash a massacre. "Run, your sister," shouted Ling Han. He charged over and punched out furiously. Po Yu completely ignored him. He was a true 7th step cultivator, undying and indestructible. Even if he was struck a few times by Ling Han, so what? To say nothing of the fact that Ling Han had just obtained battle prowess of 7 steps, even a terrifying existence like Frenzy wouldn't be able to kill him. He would rather take this attack than let Ling Shi and the others escape. Otherwise, wouldn't he be going back on his word? With a furious punch, Po Yu's body involuntarily tilted, and he flew diagonally. Boom, his attack naturally dissipated on its own. His accuracy was far too poor. Ling Shi and the others took advantage of this opportunity to flee far away. How fast were celestial venerables? How far could they travel with a single step? Seeing that he had missed this opportunity, Ling Shi and the others couldn't help but be furious. To say nothing of advancing to the 7th step, even when he had just become a celestial venerable, his words were law, and even heaven and earth had to obey them. But in front of Ling Han, the might of the 7th step seemed to be useless. He couldn't kill Ling Han, and he couldn't kill the people by Ling Han's side either. Was it really that hard to kill him? I actually let you become so strong. I really regret it, Po Yu said coldly. In fact, he had many opportunities to kill Ling Han, but at the beginning he couldn't care less about Ling Han. When he had wanted to kill him, he had been stopped by Lin Luo. By the time he had made up his mind to kill him, Ling Han had already disappeared without a trace. Now that Ling Han had returned, he actually also had battle prowess of 7 steps. If he wanted to kill him, it would be difficult, incomparably difficult. Ling Han chuckled. Your father must also be very regretful. Why did he give birth to a beast like you? Even though Po Yu's willpower had long since been unaffected by external things, his face still twitched when he heard this. These words were quite lethal. This brat's mouth was too poisonous. How could a dignified celestial venerable scold someone like this? Ling Han had opened his mouth, but Poyu was someone who cherished his reputation and cared about his image. He definitely wouldn't scold Ling Han back. What would that look like? Fine, 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 he said menacingly. Flames shot out of his eyes. These were the supreme karmic flames formed from the violent collision of 6 kinds of intrinsic powers. Even a 6th-step cultivator would be severely injured if they were touched by it. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he attacked. In terms of eloquence, the only one who could compete with Ling Han was the large black dog. Hong, the 7th-step cultivator, was furious. He attacked with a single strike. It was too terrifying. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. He activated all of his 7-stream talismans and attacked Poyu. He couldn't afford to make even the slightest mistake. After all, he didn't have an indestructible body. The two of them collided, creating a terrifying explosion. The shockwaves spread out, and the entire 100 Frost Valley completely collapsed. This place had been stabilized by Poyu's mystical power. Even if a 6th-step cultivator fought with his full strength, he would only be able to knock down a few rocks at most, and wouldn't be able to cause much damage. But in front of the power of a 7th-step cultivator, this was completely useless. With a single strike, it was completely destroyed. Poyu was also forced back over 100 kilometers by this strike. However, a boundless light flickered all over his body. The 6 kinds of intrinsic powers formed 6 wings that flapped in unison, creating a massive repulsive force that allowed him to stabilize his figure and stop retreating. Die! He flapped his wings, and his figure immediately tumbled back at an indescribably fast speed. This was the 7th step. After Ling Han activated the 7-stream combination talisman, his strength had actually already surpassed Poyu's. After all, the difference in strength between an early-stage 7-step cultivator and a peak-stage 7-step cultivator definitely wasn't as terrifying as 2,000 times. But the problem was that his physique was too weak. The collision had created a terrifying repulsive force that caused the blood in his body to boil, and his face to turn deathly pale. He couldn't help but admit that if he hadn't advanced 7 steps in his cultivation level, even if he had an advantage in strength, it would be useless. Look, he was clearly stronger now, but the person whose blood was boiling from the repulsive force was actually him. Alarm bells rang in Ling Han's heart, because Poyu hadn't activated his heavenly venerate symbol. How could a grand 7th-step cultivator not have a heavenly venerate symbol? That was obviously impossible. The 7th-step cultivator definitely had a first-rate talisman. The problem was how many of them he had, and whether he could form a combination talisman. But Heavenly Venerate Poyu hadn't used his Heavenly Venerate symbol. But this old fellow was definitely trying to kill him, not giving him a chance to tear open the void and escape. Our reading on the phone was much more refreshing. Chapter 2982. A Beautiful Romance. Ling Han did not hesitate and turned to leave. Right now, he just barely had the qualifications to fight against a 7-step expert, but if he was naive enough to think that he could defeat a 7-step expert, then he was really courting death. Once he took 6 steps, then what about 7th step? Smelly old monster, the mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. Goodbye. Ling Han tore through the void and fled. Still want to run? Heavenly Lord Sundermount sneered. Hong, he finally exploded with his full strength, and the 36 symbols on his body lit up. First-rate symbol Sundermount had actually grasped 36 first-rate symbols, and they were all combination symbols. This caused his strength to explosively increase by nearly 2,000 times. This was not inferior to Ling Han's increase in strength, and his original strength was much higher than Ling Han's, so it was naturally even more terrifying. The light wings formed from the 6 kinds of essential powers flapped rapidly, causing Sundermount's speed to soar to the limit as he rapidly closed the distance between them. Seeing Sundermount reveal his trump card, Ling Han actually breathed a sigh of relief. He had really been afraid that Sundermount would use all of his first-rate symbols at once. That kind of explosive power might reach 4,000 times, or even 5,000 times, and he would really be able to kill him in an instant. Fortunately, now that everyone's strength had been boosted, he might not be a match for Sundermount, but he could still put up a fight. Sundermount's wishful thinking was naturally to release Ling Han's 7th-rate combination symbol, and then he would suddenly erupt with power. That would naturally increase his chances of killing Ling Han. Seeing that Ling Han was about to escape, he had no choice but to change his plan and reveal his trump card ahead of time. However, the 6 wings of light moved in unison, and this speed was too fast. It was so fast that Ling Han had just stepped into the void, and the tear that had been torn open hadn't even closed when Piu had already charged over. Hong, he slashed out with his palm, and the 6 kinds of intrinsic power took form, forming 6 heaven weapons. Each of them was imbued with a terrifying power, and they attacked towards Ling Han. Ling Han's gaze sharpened. He did not know this move. In terms of the use of essential powers, Sundermount far surpassed him. There was nothing he could do about it. After all, Sundermount was a 7th step who had come from the previous Yuan world. In this aspect, perhaps even Lin Luo, Xian Fu, and the others would not be a match for him. He swung out an angry fist to meet it. Boom, the power vibrated, and the void whistled. Ling Han was sent flying, and he felt as if his body was about to be torn apart. Although everyone's strength had increased by more than 2,000 times, and it seemed fair, the force produced by the collision had also increased greatly. To Ling Han's physique, this was a huge test. Pooh! He spat out a mouthful of blood and felt his vision blur. Damn it, 7 steps is too abnormal. Ling Han thought to himself, but he did not hesitate to tear open the void and leave. This was something that only he could do. With the plane power guiding him, he could travel through the void at will. Even though Poyu had the upper hand in terms of power, he was still blasted into a sluggish state. By the time he managed to catch up, Ling Han had already torn open the void and left. He was much stronger than Ling Han, but in the void he was like a blind man, only able to find his way back, unable to open a new path. Otherwise, Frenzy would not be even stronger, and would have long since extended its tentacles to the various planes and devoured the origin world. Peng, Ling Han fell, and his head hit the ground, panting heavily. Although it was only a single exchange, it had already caused Ling Han to be severely injured. When one's power reached the limit, there would be a huge demand on one's physique. For example, Ling Han was currently at a disadvantage in terms of physique. His power was clearly not that far off. The improvement of physique can only rely on the tempering of intrinsic power, but I have only grasped 4 types now, which is half the difference compared to 7 steps. This is too much of a disadvantage. Ling Han managed to sit up cross-legged, gnawing on the great medicine for healing as he mumbled to himself. He had originally thought that he had advanced to 5 steps, and his power had greatly increased, that he had the qualifications to match 7 steps. In reality, he could only withstand a few blows, and even if 7 steps unleashed their full power, he could only receive 1 blow. Either I advance to 6 steps, or I think of a way to strengthen my physique. Advancing to 6 steps is too difficult, and according to my situation, the Crimson Great Medicine should also be ineffective against me. So, what I can do now is to think of a way to strengthen my physique. Although the unique power of a plane cannot compare to intrinsic power, there is so much power of the plane in my body, and if they are combined, it should not lose to intrinsic power. Alright, I'll first meet up with Jian Shui and the others, and then go to the origin world of the last generation. I want to obtain more great medicine so that the plane in my body can quickly grow. Ling Han gnawed on the great medicine and quickly suppressed his injuries, but 7 steps attacks were too terrifying, and he could not recover in a short while. There was nothing to be done. Heavenly venerables were detested by heavenly venerables, and once he was injured, the heaven and earth would naturally seize this opportunity to target him. Thankfully, the origin world of the last generation had produced great medicine for healing injuries. Otherwise, he could only brew it himself bit by bit, and if he could not, it was not impossible that the heavenly venerables would die. After recovering slightly, Ling Han rushed to meet up with the Empress and the others. Previously, when he had Ling Shi and the others leave, he had also told them where the Empress and Hu Niu were, so everyone knew where to meet up. Not long after, Ling Han returned to Anya City. Ling Han. Father. Fourth brother. Everyone gathered around him. After being separated for tens of billions of years, everyone had changed greatly, and the most exaggerated was Ling Han, who could already save people from 7 steps. Ling Han nodded with a smile and said, "It's all because of me that I've implicated everyone." "Huh, to be able to go to 7 steps place as a guest, and have as much to eat and drink as you want, how many people can obtain such a good thing?" The heavenly venerable Origin Born said with a smile. This caused everyone to laugh. Thinking about it, how many people could make 7 steps feel apprehensive after capturing them but not killing them? Meanwhile, the large black dog howled, "Little Han, since we now possess the power of 7 steps, shouldn't we establish our own sect?" Ling Han shook his head. "I can only barely match 7 steps, and am far from being a match for him." Everyone couldn't help but fall silent. In other words, under the despotic power of 7 steps, they could only live in seclusion and avoid the world. Ling Han smiled. "I plan to go to the last origin world again and properly increase my strength. At that time, I will truly be able to match 7 steps." Hearing this, everyone nodded. Along the way, Ling Han had already sufficiently proved his freakish talent. Since he was so confident, then he definitely could do it. Everyone decided to temporarily endure. When Ling Han truly possessed the strength to match 7 steps, it would be the day they could hold their heads high. Ling Han did not bring anyone and set off alone. Heading to a plane below the 10th level of the last origin world was too dangerous. Even with the protection of a spatial tool made from devouring metal, it was useless, and it would only be suicide. Thus, Ling Han could only act by himself. But before setting off, Ling Han first went to Zhou Heng's place. He was very curious about one thing, and that was the identity of Absolute Flame. Piyu and the others actually called him Extermination. What was going on? Chapter 2984. After reaching their destination, Ling Han and the other 2 went their separate ways. They were all 7-step battle prowess, and all of them were proud and arrogant. How could they be willing to bask in the glory of others? Ling Han descended. Peng, peng, peng. He rushed to the 9th level in one go. Before this was his limit, but now he easily reached the 10th level. However, this place had long been excavated by those 6th-step cultivators, and all that was left was a wasteland. He continued forward, and essence particles burned, turning into terrifying flames. Fortunately, this was not the intention of a 7-step cultivator. All kinds of particles returned to their own, and although they were powerful, they were only much more powerful than 6th-step cultivators. They did not reach the level of 7-step cultivators, but were somewhere in between. Thus, Ling Han only needed to expend a little effort to squeeze into the 11th level. He had never been here before, but as Zhou Heng said, he was really disappointed. It had been excavated, and endless energy storms spewed out from the mine, turning this place into hell. 7-step cultivators? They're really not particular at all. Ling Han shook his head. This place had really been excavated cleanly. He sensed that it was all abandoned stone, and there was not the slightest thing that could be used. Not only that, this place had also been greatly damaged, leaving behind many sinkholes. It was completely unlike the levels above, where miners had dug holes and dug out the celestial worthy stones inside. That was true. How could a 7-step cultivator have so much time? This should also be because a 7-step cultivator had found the time to come here to excavate after the fall of the frosty dimension. Otherwise, even if he sent out his doppelgangers, it would be useless, and he would not be able to reach this place at all. Let's go to the next level. Ling Han broke through the ground and advanced toward the 12th level. The pressure and friction of essence particles here were even more intense, and even Ling Han had to increase his defensive power slightly before he could pass through. However, to his disappointment, this place was still empty after being dug out. Thinking about it, it had been hundreds of millions of years since the fall of the frosty dimension. What kind of ability did a 7-step cultivator have? It was not easy for them to excavate a dimension. Moreover, the further down he went, the smaller the dimension was, and naturally, the faster he would be. Ling Han was not discouraged and continued to descend. The pressure increased, and the flames formed by the essence particles became more and more terrifying. This made Ling Han worry. If he went down a few more levels, would he be able to withstand it? After all, he wasn't a true 7th step cultivator, and his physique wasn't invincible. Arriving at the 13th layer, Ling Han discovered that he had been here before. Previously, there was a spatial passageway that led from the 7th layer to this place. Alright, let's go to the 14th floor. Just like that, when Ling Han arrived at the 23rd level, he finally discovered that this was a world that had yet to be fully developed. They started work. Ling Han spread out his divine sense and searched for treasures. His strength had improved a step further, and he was practically at the peak of the world. There was naturally no need to talk about how powerful his divine sense was. He searched extremely quickly. Half a day later, he reached out his hand and grabbed out. His power turned into a large hand. Ping, 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 it smashed through the ground, and then grabbed a stalk of great medicine. It was green. Ling Han swallowed it without hesitation. With his current strength, the green great medicine didn't have an obvious effect on his cultivation. But no matter how small a mosquito's leg was, it was still meat. Another half a day later, Ling Han reached out his hand again. Peng crushed stones flew everywhere. This time, he obtained an Empyrean symbol. A 6th grade symbol, one that he didn't have before. Ling Han nodded. When his cultivation reached the peak of the 5th step, he would go into seclusion for a long time and derive all the 6th grade symbols. A 7th step Empyrean had dozens of 1st grade symbols, and they could even be combined. This gave him a strong sense of crisis and pressure. But under the restrictions of his cultivation realm, it was too difficult for him to derive 1st grade symbols now. It was more reliable to start from the 6th grade symbols. Moreover, after deriving all of them, their might would also be top-notch. Time passed quietly. Ling Han's harvest wasn't small. But basically, they were all great medicines below green, and their help to him was limited. As for the Empyrean symbols, he only had a total of 6, and 2 of them were already in his possession. 3 years passed, and Ling Han was still searching for stones and treasures every day. He had long since left the region that he had entered, and he had no idea where he had gone. On this day, he discovered another great medicine. Boom, a large hand stretched out. However, when his large hand grabbed onto that stalk of great medicine, a powerful force slammed into him. Hong, this force slammed into his hand, and the tremors almost caused his large hand to shatter. After all, this was condensed from power, so there was a limit to its toughness. However, the great medicine in his hand was shattered into pieces. The power of the 7th step was too powerful. Ling Han was first stunned, and then he was enraged. Fuck, he had finally found a great medicine with great difficulty, and who was it that spoiled his plans? One, a powerful aura also surged over. Evidently, the other party was also very angry, thinking that it was Ling Han who had stolen his thing. Ling Han's figure flew up, shooting towards that person. Judging from the aura that flowed out of the other party, this was not a 7th step supreme being. Xan Chihu, Ling Han very quickly saw his opponent. It was precisely the old rival that had tried to kill him time and time again. No wonder his aura had not reached the 7th step, but he had still been able to come here. Xan Chihu laughed loudly. Ling Han, we meet again. Ling Han's expression was cold. How do you want to die? Ling Han was filled with anger towards Xan Chihu. This guy was jealous of him, and Ling Han did not take this to heart. However, this guy always used his position to take revenge, and this was too much. If he had the ability, then come at him openly and fight at the same cultivation level to see who was more powerful. You still can't kill me, Xan Chihu said with a smile. He crooked his finger at Ling Han. Since you want to fight, fine, I'll play with you. Play with your sister. Ling Han charged out, already unleashing a furious fist. Xan Chihu's expression was somewhat ugly. He really did have a sister, and Ling Han wanted to play with his sister? He was also enraged, and he punched back at Ling Han. Both of them were supreme geniuses, and they even had battle prowess at the 7th step. With a single strike, the ground around them crumbled. In front of their strength, it seemed incredibly weak. After clashing over 100 times, they were all covered in blood. There was nothing they could do about it. Their strength surpassed their cultivation level, and their physiques could not take it. Xianqihu was still fine. After all, he had an additional type of power to temper his body compared to Ling Han. Only his skin had cracked, while Ling Han's heart, lungs, and other organs had all cracked. He had suffered serious injuries. Ling Han, the higher your cultivation level, the greater the difference, Xianqihu said proudly. Xianqihu said proudly, so what if you don't lose to me in terms of strength? Your physique is too weak. His hands turned into axes, and he slashed at Ling Han. This was the truth. The reason why the 7th step was so powerful was because of their undying physiques. Otherwise, there would definitely be people who would switch sides and join madness. You're right. Ling Han nodded. If he was not even willing to admit this little bit of truth, then he would really be too narrow-minded. He pulled away from Xianqihu and did not fight him head-on. Instead, he turned his strength into all kinds of weapons, hitting, hammering, and stabbing at Xianqihu. This was what he had comprehended after his battle with Empyrean Sundermount. His 7th-tier symbols revolved completely, increasing his strength by around 2,000 times. This was too terrifying. Even Heavenly Venerable Sundermount would have to concede defeat if he did not revolve his Heavenly Venerable symbols. Pung! The 4 weapons immediately shattered, turning into countless particles. No matter what kind of powerful technique you used, it would not be able to withstand a single blow from absolute power. Feng Wuding's face was filled with shock. They were both at the 5th step and possessed the combat prowess of the 7th step, so why was he still inferior to Ling Han? He hurriedly summoned 100 planes. High-level planes appeared one after another, wrapped in strange balls of light, forming a terrifying pressure. Even though Feng Wuding did not possess as many cultivation dimensions as Ling Han, before he had cultivated to the limit, the number of cultivation dimensions was actually not important. On the contrary, because there were only 100, the pressure on Feng Wuding was much smaller, and he could cultivate each and every cultivation dimension to become stronger. The prerequisite was that his cultivation dimension could reach such a height. Evidently, as the son of destiny of the previous origin world, Feng Wuding had the ability to do so. These planes were infinitely close to or had already reached the high level. When 100 of them appeared at the same time, the pressure was quite terrifying. Ling Han snorted and also summoned 100 planes to resist. He did not need many, he just needed to counteract the pressure brought by these planes. The 2 of them clashed. This time, Ling Han was not at a disadvantage in terms of physique. In fact, he held an enormous advantage in terms of power. Feng Wuding was instantly forced to question his life. Why was he always being suppressed by Ling Han? Was he going to continue like this forever? Feng Wuding lost his confidence for the first time. His battle prowess was already at the 7th step, but he was still no match for Ling Han. Just how was he going to defeat this powerful enemy? In that moment of distraction, he was struck by a punch, and his entire body was sent flying. Again and again he was defeated. Feng Wuding barely managed to stop himself, and his face was full of despair. Was Ling Han his nemesis? However, as a supreme prodigy who was second only to Ling Han, his confidence was immediately reignited. No, as long as he could reach the 6th or 7th step before Ling Han, he could still win, especially when he was at the 7th step. 7 steps undying and indestructible, with an invincible physique. Then, if he reached the 7th step first, he would be able to exhaust Ling Han to death. His eyes lit up, and he was instantly filled with battle intent. Ling Han hesitated slightly. Should he kill this person? After some thought, he decided to spare Feng Wuding's life. He had already defeated an opponent, so why would he be afraid that he would one day surpass him? That was impossible, even if this person was Feng Wuding, the strongest prodigy who was second only to him. Scram. Remember to take a detour when you see me in the future. Otherwise, I'll beat you up every time I see you, Ling Han said. He didn't kill Feng Wuding because frenzy was becoming more and more powerful, and there was also the mysterious extinction. The origin world really needed the power of a seventh-step expert. Feng Wuding gritted his teeth and did not retort. He was not strong enough, so no matter how arrogant he was, he would only be asking to be humiliated. Oh right. Ling Han waved his hand. Same old rules, hand over all your treasures. He had almost forgotten that this was a child of wealth. How could he let him off so easily? Feng Wuding opened his mouth slightly. You actually want to rob me? Either you hand it over yourself, or I'll cripple you and search for it. Make your choice, Ling Han said indifferently, giving Feng Wuding two choices. Feng Wuding gritted his teeth and waved his hand at Ling Han. Instantly, over a dozen great herbs flew over. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.